Villains cornered him, ripped off his visor, and told him to surrender. And this cold, calculated, dead-eyed menace smiled and said, "Wait, I surrender." "Not!" Then opened one eye and turned the entire corridor into a smoking crater. Who raised this sick bastard?
Welcome, legends, to Chronos Recom. I wrote this story myself, so if you have any suggestions or what-ifs you want to see, drop it in the comments below. Also, just wanted to let you know I've got a Patreon set up now for anyone who wants to support the channel directly. You can get early access to stories, submit direct fan requests, and get exclusive content. It's totally optional, but if you want to help keep these stories coming, check it out. Links in the description. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that bell so you never miss an upload. Let's dive into this story.
The first time Izuku Midoriya opened his eyes, truly opened them, he erased a building. He was 4 years old. Sitting at the kitchen table, his mother had made katsudon. He sneezed. His eyes flew open, and a beam of concentrated red energy punched through the ceiling, through the second floor, through the roof, and kept going. Straight up, into the sky. The shockwave blew out every window on the block. Izuku Midoriya found her son standing in the middle of a ruined apartment, eyes squeezed shut, tears streaming down his face, screaming. Not because he was hurt, because he could feel it. The thing behind his eyes. Infinite. Pressing. Wanting out. The doctors had no explanation. The quirk specialists had theories but no answers. The energy readings broke their machines. One physicist from a government agency sat across from Inko and said, very carefully, "Mrs. Midoriya, your son's eyes appear to be portals, to somewhere we can't measure. The energy output has no theoretical ceiling." Inko asked what that meant. The physicist removed his glasses, cleaned them, and said, "It means if he ever opens his eyes without protection, he could split this country in half, and I am not exaggerating." Izuku was blindfolded that night. He stayed blindfolded for 3 years. 3 years in the dark. Think about that for a second. A child. 4 years old, learning to eat, walk, and exist without ever seeing the world. Most kids would break. Most adults would break. Izuku Midoriya did not break. He adapted. In the darkness, he learned to listen. He memorized footsteps. He counted paces between rooms. He built a mental map of his apartment, his hallway, his street, his neighborhood, all through sound, touch, and geometry. His mother read him textbooks because he asked her to. Not storybooks. Textbooks, physics, spatial mathematics, angles of incidence and reflection. By age 5, he could navigate his apartment faster than most people could with working eyes. By age 6, he could tell you the exact dimensions of any room he'd been in for more than 30 seconds. By age 7, a support tech company, funded partly by a government that was very, very interested in keeping Izuku Midoriya stable, delivered a pair of ruby quartz lenses. The mineral was the only known substance that could absorb and neutralize the concussive energy from his eyes. They built the lenses into a visor, sleek, red-tinted, a band across his eyes with a single adjustable aperture. The day Izuku put on that visor and opened his eyes for the first time in 3 years, he looked out his window at the Musutafu skyline and said nothing for a long time. His mother was crying behind him. Izuku turned around, looked at her face, the first face he'd seen since he was 4. "You look tired, Mom," he said. Inko laughed through her tears. "You look like a superhero," she said. Izuku touched the visor, felt its weight, felt the pressure behind his eyes. Constant, eternal, barely held back by a thin layer of mineral and engineering. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Something like that." Let's skip ahead. You don't need the full childhood montage. Here's what you need to know. By the time Izuku Midoriya was 14, he was not a normal kid. He wasn't even in the same zip code as normal. While other kids were figuring out their quirks by throwing fire or growing tails, Izuku was calculating blast trajectories in his notebook, training his body to handle the recoil of his own power, and studying every recorded hero fight in existence. He didn't study them like a fan. He studied them like a general reviews battlefield footage. Every weakness, every inefficiency, every missed opportunity. He filled 12 notebooks, not with admiration, but with analysis. Cold, precise, tactical breakdowns. All Might leaves his left side open after a Detroit smash. 2-second recovery window, exploitable. Endeavor overcommits on prominence burn. Mobility drops to near zero. Flankable. He wrote these things down at age 12 about the number 1 and number 2 heroes, and he wasn't wrong about any of it. His middle school years were unremarkable on the surface. He went to Aldera. He sat in the back. He wore his visor every single day. Some kids talked, some kids whispered, a few tried to bully him early on. That stopped fast. Katsuki Bakugo, because we're going to use his actual name like civilized people, was the king of Aldera Junior High. Explosion quirk. Loud. Aggressive. Talented. He'd been top dog since kindergarten, and everyone knew it. The first time Bakugo tried to step to Izuku was in their second year. Izuku was eating lunch alone, reading a physics journal. Bakugo slapped the journal off the table. "Hey, visor boy, you think you're special?" Izuku didn't look up. He reached down, picked up the journal, found his page, and kept reading. Bakugo's palm crackled. "I'm talking to you." Izuku finally looked at him. The visor gleamed red. Bakugo saw his own reflection in it, warped small. "You have 4 seconds to walk away," Izuku said. His voice was flat. No anger, no fear, just math. Bakugo hesitated, and that hesitation told Izuku everything he needed to know. 4, 3. "Don't you dare count at me. 2. Bakugo's hands were sparking. The other students had backed away. The cafeteria was dead silent. 1. Izuku touched the side of his visor. The aperture hummed. A faint red glow leaked from the edges. Nothing happened, because Bakugo turned around and walked away. He never said a word about it later. And nobody ever bothered Izuku at Aldera again. Here's the thing about Izuku Midoriya. He didn't hate Bakugo. He didn't hate anyone. Hate requires emotional investment, and Izuku had redirected all of that into something more useful. Purpose. He was going to UA. He was going to become a hero. And he was going to do it his way. The UA entrance exam, 10 months of solo training, running, calisthenics, spatial awareness drills. Izuku didn't have a mentor. He didn't need one. He'd been training since he was blind. He arrived at UA's front gate on exam day wearing black cargo pants, combat boots, a fitted dark shirt, and his visor. His green hair was wilder than ever, but the visor made it work. He looked less like a nervous 15-year-old and more like someone who'd walked off a military base. Bakugo was there too. They locked eyes across the courtyard. Bakugo scowled. Izuku gave him a single nod, the kind you give to someone you acknowledge but don't think about twice. That made Bakugo angrier than any insult ever could. Present Mike was on stage doing his thing. Shouting, hyping, explaining the point system. 1-pointers, 2-pointers, 3-pointers, and the 0-pointer, a massive obstacle worth no points. A kid with glasses, Tenya Ida, stood up and asked a sharp question about the 0-pointer. Present Mike fumbled the answer. Izuku didn't care about the 0-pointer. He cared about the math. 10 minutes, faux villains, points, efficiency. He'd already calculated his optimal strategy on the train ride over. The gates opened. Fake City B materialized in front of him. Other examinees charged forward screaming. Izuku walked. 1-pointer came from the left. Izuku turned his head, tapped his visor. A thin beam, precise, contained, punched through the robot's head. It dropped. He kept walking. 2-pointer burst through a wall. Izuku didn't even stop. Beam. Center mass. The robot folded in half and hit the ground, sparking. 3 examinees were struggling with a 3-pointer around the corner. They were throwing punches using quirks, making noise. The robot was swatting them like flies. Izuku rounded the corner, assessed, fired. 1 shot, through the robot's power core. It collapsed. The 3 examinees turned to look at him. He was already gone. In the observation room, the UA faculty watched the monitors. Dozens of screens showing hundreds of examinees, but one screen kept pulling eyes. "Who is that?" Midnight asked, leaning forward. Examinee 2B, Izuku Midoriya. Cementos read from his tablet. Quirk, optic, blast. On screen, Izuku was dismantling robots like he was sorting mail. No wasted movement, no wasted energy. Every shot was a kill shot. His efficiency is remarkable, the principal Nezu thus observed, sipping his tea. He hasn't missed once. He hasn't even broken a sweat, Aizawa muttered, watching through half-closed eyes. Present Mike, who was monitoring remotely, whistled. That kid's racking up points faster than anyone in Sector B. He's already at 47. The exam's been running for 4 minutes, Midnight said, silence in the room. On screen, Izuku fired a beam at a building wall. It ricocheted off the concrete and hit a two-pointer that was behind the building, behind Hibinen's, out of his direct line of sight. Nezu set down his tea. He used the angle of the wall to redirect his beam. That requires real-time calculation of trajectory, angle of incidence, surface composition, and distance, Aizawa said, while moving, in a combat zone. Nezu smiled that unsettling smile of his. Interesting. The 6-minute mark hit. Izuku had 63 points. The next highest in his sector was 28. Then they released the zero-pointer. The ground shook. A shadow fell over the fake city. The massive robot, stories tall, a rolling fortress of steel, emerged from behind the buildings, crushing everything in its path. The earth cracked under its treads. Buildings crumbled at its shoulders. Examinees ran. They scattered like ants, screaming, tripping over each other. Izuku stopped walking. He looked up at the zero-pointer. It was taller than most buildings in the arena. Its single optical sensor swept the ground, targeting everything. A girl, round face, brown hair, gravity quirk, was trapped under rubble. She was struggling, her leg pinned. The zero-pointer was rolling toward her. Other examinees were sprinting in the opposite direction. Izuku did the math. 7 seconds until the robot reached her. 12 seconds to reach her on foot, free her, and move. Insufficient. One option remaining. He broke into a dead sprint toward the robot, past the fleeing students. His boots hit pavement hard. He jumped. Not a normal jump. He fired a beam straight down at the ground beneath him, a controlled burst that launched him 50 feet into the air like a human rocket. He soared upward, wind whipping his hair back, the zero-pointer's massive frame filling his entire field of vision. He landed on the robot's shoulder. Superhero landing. One knee down, one fist on the metal. The impact dented the steel. In the observation room, every single teacher was standing. Izuku stood up on the zero-pointer's shoulder. He reached up to his visor, his fingers found the aperture control. Maximum output. He twisted it all the way open. His eyes opened fully behind the ruby quartz for the first time since he was 4 years old. A column of red energy erupted from his visor. Not a beam, a column. A pillar of concussive force the width of a bus, blazing crimson, screaming with compressed kinetic power. It hit the zero-pointer dead center in the chest and kept going. The beam punched through the robot's chest plate, like it was cardboard, through the internal structure, through the back plate. And it kept going. Up, through the arena ceiling simulation, into the sky. The clouds split. A perfect circular hole opened in the overcast sky above the exam arena, revealing blue sky beyond. The shockwave from the blast blew out windows in a 3-block radius. Cars flipped, lampposts bent. Dust and debris spiraled outward in a massive ring. The zero-pointer, with a hole the size of a swimming pool through its torso, groaned. Its lights flickered. It pitched forward. Izuku dropped off its shoulder, landed on the ground, and walked away. The robot collapsed behind him. The crash was seismic. Chunks of metal flew. Smoke billowed. Izuku tapped his visor back to its lowest setting. The red glow faded to a faint hum. He looked at the trapped girl, walked over, lifted the rubble off her leg. The same arms that absorbed the recoil of that blast had real strength behind them. "Can you stand?" he asked. She stared at him. Her mouth was open. Her eyes were the size of dinner plates. That was. "Can you stand?" he repeated, patient, calm. "Yes." He helped her up, turned around, started walking toward the exit. Behind him, the arena was destroyed. A trench carved by the blast extended half a mile. The zero-pointer was a smoking ruin. The sky still had a hole in it. The girl, Ochako Uraraka, watched him go. "Who is that?" she whispered. In the observation room, no one spoke for a full 15 seconds. Recovery Girl broke the silence. "Good Lord." Present Mike's jaw was on the desk. Did he just one-shot a zero-pointer? The zero-pointer? "He didn't just destroy it," Nezu said, his small eyes gleaming. "He shot through it." The beam continued for approximately 1.2 kilometers before dissipating. Aizawa was standing now. His eyes were fully open. That alone should tell you how serious this was. Eraserhead, the man who was allergic to being impressed, was standing with both eyes wide open. "That was his maximum?" Aizawa asked. Nezu tilted his head. "I don't believe it was." More silence. "I want him in my class," Aizawa said. Every head in the room turned to look at him. "What?" he said. "Someone has to keep an eye on him." Izuku got into UA, but with 77 villain points and 60 rescue points for saving Uraraka, the highest entrance exam score in 17 years. The previous record holder was Endeavor. Let that sink in. When the acceptance letter arrived, Izuku watched the holographic message from All Might, the #1 hero, apparently a faculty member now, congratulating him. All Might was beaming. Golden, larger than life. Young Midoriya, your performance was nothing short of extraordinary. Welcome to UA. Izuku turned off the message and looked at his visor sitting on his desk. For a moment, just a moment, he felt something old stir behind his eyes. A feeling that wasn't quite a memory, but wasn't quite imagination either. A flash of something red, something ancient. A voice that sounded like his own, but deeper, older, more tired. We were always meant to lead. Izuku blinked. The feeling passed. He picked up his visor and put it on. Yeah, he said to the empty room, I know. First day at UA Class 1A, the elite, Izuku arrived early. He sat in his assigned seat, second row, near the window. He placed his bag down, crossed his arms, and waited. Students filtered in. He cataloged each one automatically. Habit, Tenya Ida, engine quirk, stiff posture, precise movements, military family probably, discipline-oriented, predictable, Ochako Uraraka, the girl from the exam. She spotted him immediately and practically bounced over. It's you, the beam guy. I never got to properly thank you. No thanks necessary. It was the tactically sound decision. She blinked. You saved my life because of tactics? I saved your life because it needed saving. The tactics just made it efficient. She stared at him. Then she laughed. You're weird. I like you. Momo Yaoyorozu. Creation quirk. Got in on recommendation. Carries herself like old money. Sharp eyes, sharper mind. Shoto Todoroki. Half cold, half hot. Also recommendation. Endeavor's son. The heterochromia was distinctive. He walked in with the energy of someone who'd rather be literally anywhere else. Izuku and Todoroki made eye contact as Todoroki took his seat. It lasted about 2 seconds. Neither of them looked away first. They just moved on. Two apex predators acknowledging each other across the savannah. Not yet. Katsuki Bakugo walked in loud, feet on the desk, arms behind his head, radiating, I'm the best, fight me about it energy like always. He spotted Izuku. His eyes narrowed. You again. Me again, Izuku confirmed. Don't think UA changes anything. I'm still going to be #1. Izuku adjusted his visor. Sure. That single word, sure, delivered with complete indifference, did more psychic damage to Bakugo than any explosion ever could. The door slid open. A yellow sleeping bag rolled into the room. It stopped. A face emerged. Dark circles, tired eyes, a scarf that moved on its own. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down after I entered. That's 8 seconds wasted. Rational students would have been silent in 3. Shota Aizawa. Pro hero, Eraserhead. Their homeroom teacher. He unzipped the sleeping bag, stood up, and stared at the class with the enthusiasm of a man being forced to chaperone a field trip to his own funeral. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa. Life is irrational. Put on your gym clothes. We're going outside. The quirk apprehension test, Aizawa laid it out. 8 physical tests, quirk usage allowed. Lowest score gets expelled. This is irrational and unfair, Aizawa said. So is life. Deal with it. Bakugo went first for the ball throw. He screamed, exploded, and launched the ball 705 meters. The class was impressed. 705 meters, Bakugo grinned. Beat that. Izuku stepped into the circle. Aizawa watched. The other students watched. Bakugo crossed his arms. Izuku held the ball in one hand. He tossed it up lightly. As it reached the peak of its toss, maybe 2 feet above his palm, he tilted his head slightly. A microbeam, thinner than a pencil, hit the ball dead center. The ball vanished. It didn't arc. It didn't fly. It was just gone. Faster than the tracking equipment could follow. A faint red line traced across the sky and disappeared over the horizon. Aizawa's device beeped. He looked at it. His eyebrow twitched. He turned the screen toward the class. It left the device's tracking range, Aizawa said flatly. The ball is currently in low orbit. Dead. Silence. What? Bakugo's voice cracked. That's not possible, Ida stammered. A ball can't simply... It can if you apply sufficient force, Izuku said, stepping out of the circle. The beam imparted approximately 47 million newtons of concussive force to a 200-gram ball. Physics handles the rest. Uraraka's mouth was hanging open. Todoroki's expression hadn't changed, but his left hand was clenched. Yaoyorozu was already scribbling calculations in her head, and her eyes were getting wider with every number. He put a softball into space. A kid with a tail, Ojiro, whispered. He put a softball into space. A pink-skinned girl, Ashido, yelled considerably less quietly. Bakugo was vibrating. His palms were crackling. His jaw was locked so tight you could see the muscles in his neck straining. He'd thrown the ball 705 meters and thought he was king. Izuku sent it into orbit and didn't even change his breathing. The rest of the tests went about how you'd expect. Izuku didn't win every single one. He wasn't built for things like grip strength or flexibility. But where raw power or tactical application mattered, he was untouchable. Sidesteps, he used microblasts from his visor to zigzag at inhuman speed, 50-meter dash. He fired behind himself and rocketed forward like a jet. 2.1 seconds. The previous best in the class was Ida at 3.04. Seated toe touch? He did average. He's not a god at stretching, he's a human weapon. There's a difference. Long jump? He blasted the ground beneath him and cleared the sandbox entirely. Landed in the adjacent parking lot. Present Mike had to move his car. At the end of the tests, Aizawa displayed the results. Izuku Midoriya. First place, Katsuki Bakugo. Third, Todoroki. Second. The kid in last place, Mineta, the grape kid, looked like he was about to cry. Aizawa let the tension hang for 5 seconds. Then he said, "I'm not expelling anyone. It was a logical ruse to make you try harder." Mineta collapsed. Several students exhaled. Bakugo didn't exhale. He was still staring at Izuku's back. There was something burning behind those red eyes that had nothing to do with his quirk. Izuku felt the stare. He didn't turn around. He didn't need to. The first week of classes established the hierarchy fast. In any group, there's a pecking order. In Class 1A, it crystallized almost immediately. Izuku was the top, not because he demanded it, not because he campaigned for it. He just was. He answered questions in class with precise tactical reasoning. He outperformed in every combat simulation. And he carried himself with the quiet gravity of someone who'd been fighting his own power since childhood. People gravitated toward him. Uraraka sat next to him at lunch. Ida started asking him strategic questions. Yaoyorozu engaged him in analysis discussions after class. Todoroki watched him from a distance. Always watching, always measuring. Bakugo hated it. Loudly. "You think you're better than me?" Bakugo cornered him after a training session. "I don't think about you at all," Izuku said. Bakugo's explosion echoed off the hallway walls. Izuku didn't flinch. He turned and walked away, and the scorch mark on the wall behind where he'd been standing smoked gently. Aizawa appeared from around the corner. "Bakugo, detention. Midoriya, keep walking." Izuku kept walking. That exchange spread through the school in about an hour. By dinner time, half of UA had heard some version of the visor kid told Bakugo he doesn't think about him at all. It was the kind of line that lives forever, the kind of thing people put on t-shirts. 2 weeks in. Combat training with all might. The exercise was simple. Teams of 2. Heroes versus villains. Capture the weapon or capture the opposing team. Izuku was paired with Uraraka. Their opponents? Bakugo and Ida. Bakugo grinned like a wolf. Finally! "This should be interesting," All Might said from the monitoring room. Izuku and Uraraka entered the building from the ground floor. Ida was upstairs guarding the weapon. Bakugo was somewhere. "What's the plan?" Uraraka asked. "Bakugo will come for me. He's been waiting for this since the entrance exam. He won't be able to help himself. So what do we... You go up, take the weapon. I'll handle Bakugo. Are you sure? He's loud, aggressive, predictable. Go!" Uraraka hesitated. Then she nodded and moved toward the stairs. Izuku stood in the middle of the ground floor hallway, arms at his sides, visor humming faintly. 3, 2, 1. Bakugo came through the wall to his right, explosion propelled, gauntlets raised, a right hook trailing smoke and fire aimed directly at Izuku's face. Izuku stepped left, not dodged. Stepped, calm, measured, like he was avoiding a puddle on the sidewalk. Bakugo's fist blew a hole in the wall behind him. "You're 1 second slower on the right hook than the left," Izuku said. "You telegraph it with your shoulder." Bakugo screamed. He launched a barrage, explosion after explosion, close range, meant to overwhelm. Izuku moved through them like water. Each step was calculated. Each angle was pre-measured. He wasn't faster than Bakugo. He was smarter. He knew where Bakugo would aim before Bakugo did. "Stand still and fight me!" Bakugo roared. "Okay." Izuku stopped moving. Bakugo threw everything he had. A massive right explosion aimed at Izuku's chest. Izuku tilted his head. Microbeam. It hit Bakugo's gauntlet and deflected the explosion sideways. The blast tore through the wall instead of hitting Izuku. Before Bakugo could recover, Izuku fired a controlled burst at the floor beneath Bakugo's feet. The concrete shattered. Bakugo stumbled. Izuku stepped forward and placed his palm on Bakugo's chest. Not a blast, just a hand. Yield. Bakugo stared at him, chest heaving, sweat and nitroglycerin dripping, eyes wild with rage and something else. Something that might have been respect, buried so deep under pride that Bakugo himself didn't know it was there. Go to hell. That wasn't one of the options. Izuku tilted his visor down. A red glow illuminated Bakugo's face from an inch away. Yield. Bakugo's teeth ground together, his fists shook. Fine. In the monitoring room, All Might's smile was enormous. But his eyes, those sharp, experienced eyes, were calculating. He didn't just beat him, All Might said quietly. He disassembled him. On the upper floor, Uraraka had already captured the weapon. Ida put up a decent fight. He was fast and disciplined. But Uraraka's zero gravity sent him floating into the ceiling at a critical moment, and she slapped the weapon while he was trying to figure out which way was down. Hero team wins. Izuku walked out of the building without a scratch, without a hair out of place. His visor gleamed in the afternoon light. The class was watching from the monitors. Kaminari, the electric kid, summed up everyone's feelings perfectly. Bro, he's terrifying. He's amazing, Uraraka corrected, still catching her breath. He's terrifying and amazing, Ashido added. Todoroki said nothing, but he unclenched his fist, and there was ice on the floor where he'd been standing. Days turned into weeks, classes, training. The rhythm of Ue Izuku established himself quickly. He wasn't the most social person in Class 1A. He wasn't the loudest or the most charming, but he was the one people looked to when things got complicated. During rescue training simulations, he organized his classmates with military precision. During tactical exercises, he saw solutions 3 moves ahead. During sparring, he was clinical, efficient, dominant. He had a small circle. Uraraka, who refused to be intimidated by his intensity and kept dragging him to lunch. Ida, who respected his discipline and structure. Yaoyorozu, who was the only one who could keep up with his tactical discussions. Todoroki, who never actually joined the circle but kept appearing at its edges, watching, listening. And then there was the dynamic with Bakugo. After the combat exercise, something shifted. Bakugo didn't stop being Bakugo. He was still loud, still aggressive, still convinced he was destined for the top, but he stopped aiming that aggression directly at Izuku. Not because he'd given up, because he'd found something more useful than rivalry, motivation. Every time Izuku did something impressive, Bakugo trained harder. Every time Izuku demonstrated a new application of his quirk, Bakugo pushed his own explosions further. He never admitted it. He'd rather chew glass. But the improvement was there. Aizawa noticed. He noticed everything. Midoriya, Aizawa said one afternoon, pulling him aside after class. Sir, you're turning my class into soldiers. I'm organizing them into a functional unit. Same thing. Aizawa studied him. Those tired eyes saw more than they let on. Where did you learn to lead like that? Izuku paused. For a half second, barely perceptible, something flickered behind his visor, that old feeling, that ancient instinct. I don't know, he said honestly. It just feels familiar. Aizawa stared at him for a long moment, then he nodded. Don't let it go to your head. That would be inefficient. Aizawa almost smiled. Almost. The USJ, 13 days into the semester. A field trip to the unforeseen simulation joint, a massive facility designed for rescue training. 13, the space hero, was leading the exercise. Aizawa was supervising. Class 1A arrived in high spirits. The facility was enormous, a dome the size of a sports stadium containing multiple disaster zones. Flood, fire, landslide, downpour. Each zone was a mini environment designed to simulate real rescue scenarios. Izuku cataloged the terrain immediately. Entrances, exits, choke points, lines of sight. He did this automatically, the way other people breathe. He felt something wrong before it happened. A tension in the air, a frequency shift. His instincts, those deep, inherited instincts, screamed. Aizawa-sensei. His voice was sharp enough to cut the chatter. Aizawa turned. We have incoming. A black portal opened at the center of the facility. Purple and black mist swirled, and from it poured villains. Dozens of them. A small army of quirk users spreading out through the dome like a plague. At the center of the portal stood 2 figures. A man covered in disembodied hands, one on his face, others on his shoulders and arms. Behind him, a creature, massive. Brain exposed, black skin, empty eyes, built like a tank crossed with a nightmare. Is this real? Kirishima asked, his voice tight. It's real, Aizawa confirmed, his capture scarf already unfurling. 13. Protect the students. I'm going in. Sensei, wait, Ida started, but Aizawa was already moving. He leaped down the stairs and into the fray, capture scarf whipping, erasing quirks, dropping villains with brutal efficiency. The mist villain, Kurogiri, appeared at the top of the stairs, blocking the exit. I'm afraid I can't allow you to leave, Kurogiri said, his voice smooth and cultured. The purple mist expanded. It engulfed Class 1A. Students screamed as they were teleported, scattered across the facility, separated, isolated. When the mist cleared, Izuku was standing in the flood zone, waist deep in water. Alone. Not alone. Tsuyuasui, the frog girl, surfaced next to him, and Mineta was clinging to a piece of debris, like hyperventilating. Villains were emerging from the water around them. 5, 10, 15, all grinning, all confident. A bunch of kids? One laughed. This'll be easy. Mineta was panicking. We're gonna die. We're going to die. No one is dying, Izuku said. His voice cut through the panic like a blade through silk. Calm. Absolute. Asui, can you swim with a passenger? Call Mitsu. And yes. Take Mineta. Get to high ground. I'll handle the water. There are 15 villains in the water. Izuku adjusted his visor. I know, I counted. He aimed down at the water's surface, fired a wide-angle beam. The concussive force hit the water and turned it into a weapon. A massive shockwave rippled outward, creating a circle of displaced water that slammed into the villains like a horizontal tsunami. Bodies flew. The water itself became a battering ram. 8 villains went down in 2 seconds. The remaining 7 panicked. 3 tried to rush him. Izuku picked them off with precision shots, 1 to the chest, 1 to the shoulder, 1 to the kneecap. They dropped. The last 4 dove underwater, trying to attack from below. Izuku fired straight down, into the water. The concussive force traveled through the liquid and hit everything submerged. The 4 villains surfaced unconscious, floating like dead fish. Total time, 11 seconds. Sue had Mineta on her back, clinging to a support pillar, staring. We should go, Izuku said. The main fight is at the central plaza. Sue nodded slowly. She'd known Izuku was strong. Everyone knew that. Everyone knew that. But knowing it and watching him clear 15 villains in 11 seconds were 2 very different experiences. They moved fast through the facility toward the center where the real battle was happening. They didn't make it far. They rounded a corner near the landslide zone and walked straight into a wall of bodies. 9 villains. Spread across the corridor, blocking every exit. They'd been waiting, positioned deliberately like someone had radioed ahead and told them exactly which route the boy with the visor would take. Tsuyu, take Mineta and go ahead, Izuku said quietly without turning around. Through the maintenance door on the left, 30 meters. Go. Sue grabbed Mineta and moved. No questions. She'd already learned. When Midoriya told you to go, you went. Izuku faced the 9 of them alone. The villains fanned out, confident. Some of them were smiling. The one at the front was big, built like a refrigerator with tattoos, and he had the look of someone who'd hurt a lot of people and enjoyed every second of it. Little kid, he said, all alone. 9 against 1 isn't the advantage you think it is, Izuku said. The big one laughed. The others spread further, flanking, surrounding. Classic encirclement. A smart tactic against someone with a directional quirk. Izuku let them come. He tracked all 9 positions simultaneously, his spatial awareness painting a perfect map of the corridor. Left flank, right flank, 2 closing from behind. The big one coming straight ahead, 4 hanging back as support. He fired left, 2 down, fired right, 1 down, spun and fired behind him. 1 more, 5 left, and the big one had closed the distance. He was fast. His quirk was enhancement, pure, brute physical amplification. He crossed the last 10 meters in a heartbeat and got his hands on Izuku, 1 massive arm around his torso, the other reaching for his face. Izuku fired a beam at the floor, launched himself upward, breaking the grip. But the villain's hand clipped the visor as he rose. The ruby quartz panel twisted, cracked at the mount, and then, with a sharp metallic snap, it tore free. Izuku's eyes snapped shut the instant he felt it go. He landed. Both feet, eyes shut, completely still. The corridor went quiet. The big villain held up the visor, dangled it between two fingers, grinning so wide his face looked like it might split open. "Gotcha," he said. "You're blind now, kid. Nowhere to aim, nowhere to run. Just give it up, surrender, and maybe we don't break anything important." The remaining four fanned out around Izuku. Closing in, savoring it, Izuku stood there, eyes shut, chin slightly down, arms loose at his sides. He was smiling. It was a small smile, quiet. The kind of smile that, in retrospect, should have been the most terrifying thing any of them saw that day. "Wait," Izuku said. His voice was calm, the voice of someone who had already decided how this ends. "I surrender." The big villain blinked. His grin stretched further. He stepped forward, 1 step, 2 steps, closing into arm's reach. The others followed, all 5 of them, tight now, crowded in, celebrating before the moment was over. Smart kid, knew you'd see reason eventually. Izuku opened one eye. Not. One uncontrolled eye. No visor, no aperture, no limits. A wide-angle blast detonated from his right eye with the force of a wrecking ball swung sideways. Not a beam, a wave, a wall of red concussive energy that erupted outward in a 50-degree arc and consumed everything in front of him. All 5 villains vanished into the blast simultaneously. They didn't fly back. They didn't roll. One instant, they were standing. The next instant, the corridor where they'd been standing was a smoking crater. The walls cracked. The ceiling caved. 3 support struts buckled. A chunk of the USJ's outer wall blew outward and left a hole the shape of a scream. Dust. Smoke. Red light fading. Izuku shut his eye, reached into the debris, found his visor, still in the big villain's hand, which got separated to the villain's body that was now embedded in the far wall, unconscious and smoking from 3 different angles. He pried the visor free, examined it. The mount was cracked, but the lens was intact. Ruby quartz didn't break easy. He snapped it back onto his face. The familiar hum returned. The pressure behind his eyes reined in and controlled again like a river returned to its banks. He surveyed the corridor. 9 villains down. The structural damage was considerable. A new ventilation shaft had been accidentally created in the east wall. Sunlight came through it. Rule number 1, Izuku said to no one in particular, never take my glasses. He stepped over the rubble and kept moving, and the real battle was bad. Aizawa was on the ground, beaten. The hand villain, Tomura Shigaraki, had him by the elbow. Aizawa's arm was disintegrating where Shigaraki's fingers touched. The pro hero's capture scarf was torn. His goggles were cracked. He was still fighting, still resisting, but he was losing. The creature, the Nomu, stood behind Shigaraki like a biological weapon on standby. Massive, silent, waiting. Class 1A was scattered across the facility, fighting their own battles. Some were doing well. Others were struggling, but none of them could reach the central plaza, except Izuku. He arrived at the top of the stairs overlooking the central plaza. Tsu and Mineta were behind him. Below, Shigaraki had Aizawa pinned. The Nomu stood ready. Kurogiri hovered nearby. Asui, get Aizawa when I create an opening. Mineta, stay out of the way. That's an order, not a suggestion. Mineta nodded frantically. Izuku walked down the stairs. Not ran. Walked. Shigaraki noticed him. Those red eyes behind the hand mask narrowed. Another one? How annoying. Izuku reached the bottom of the stairs. He was 50 meters from Shigaraki. His visor hummed. Release my teacher. Shigaraki laughed. It was a dry, cracked sound. Or what? Izuku fired. A precision beam aimed at Shigaraki's wrist, the hand holding Aizawa. Shigaraki released Aizawa and dodged. Barely. The beam scorched the ground where his hand had been. Nomu, Shigaraki said. The creature moved. Fast. Way too fast for something that size. It blurred across the distance and swung at Izuku with a fist the size of a car. Izuku fired at the ground and launched himself straight up. The Nomu's fist cratered the earth where he'd been standing. Mid-air, Izuku fired down at the Nomu. 3 shots, center mass. The beams hit. The Nomu absorbed them. Its body rippled with the impact, but it didn't move, didn't flinch. Shock absorption, Shigaraki said, grinning. Your little light show won't work on Nomu. It was designed to kill All Might himself. Izuku landed 20 meters away. His mind was running calculations at inhuman speed. Shock absorption. Not nullification. Absorption. There was a difference. Absorption had a limit. Everything had a limit. He just had to exceed it. But first, the other problem. Students were arriving. Todoroki emerged from the ice zone, coated in frost. Bakugo landed from somewhere with a series of explosions. Kirishima was right behind him. Ida had gone for reinforcements. Izuku had seen him sprint toward the exit earlier and chose not to stop him. Smart move. They needed pros. "Fall in," Izuku commanded. His voice carried across the plaza. Not a shout, a command. The kind of voice that goes straight past your ears and into your spine. Todoroki, Bakugo, and Kirishima all stopped. They looked at him. "Todoroki, ice the perimeter. Block reinforcement paths for the remaining villains." Bakugo, "Suppression fire on the mist villain. Keep Kurogiri contained. He's their escape route." Kirishima, "Guard Aizawa. Nothing touches him." Todoroki moved immediately. A wall of ice erupted from the ground, sealing 3 entrances to the plaza. Bakugo hesitated for exactly 1 second. Then he launched at Kurogiri with a feral grin. "Don't think this means I'm following your orders." "Wouldn't dream of it," Izuku said. Kirishima hardened his body and stationed himself over Aizawa's fallen form. "I got him." That left the Nomu, and Shigaraki and Izuku faced them both. "You're a strategic thinker," Shigaraki observed, scratching his neck. "I hate strategic thinkers." "That's because strategic thinkers beat you." Shigaraki's scratching intensified. "Nomu, kill him." The Nomu charged. What happened next took approximately 12 seconds and would be discussed in every hero analysis class for the next decade. Izuku fired a beam at the floor in front of the Nomu. The concussive force shattered the concrete and sent chunks of stone flying upward, a wall of debris. The Nomu smashed through it, but it slowed for half a second. Half a second was all Izuku needed. He fired at the ceiling. A support beam cracked and dropped a massive slab of concrete directly onto the Nomu's back. The creature caught it, its muscles strained. It was pinned for 1 second. Izuku used that second to reposition. He fired at a metal support column to his right. The beam ricocheted off the steel, changed angle by 37 degrees, and hit the Nomu in the side of the head from an angle it couldn't see. The Nomu stumbled. 1 step. That was all Izuku had ever gotten anyone to stumble. But he wasn't trying to beat the Nomu with precision shots. He was testing, probing, finding the edges of shock absorption. He now had the data he needed. "Shock absorption works on a gradient," Izuku said, mostly to himself. "Distributed force over time, it can absorb repeated impacts of escalating power, but it has a saturation point, and sustained concentrated force at maximum output." He stopped talking. He raised his hand to his visor. "Everyone get behind something solid." Todoroki heard the tone. He threw up an ice wall. Bakugo blasted himself behind a pillar. Kirishima hunkered over Aizawa. The Nomu recovered and charged again. Shigaraki was behind it, watching with those unsettling eyes. Izuku reached up and removed his visor. His eyes were closed. The ruby quartz visor hung in his right hand. "What's he doing?" Todoroki asked from behind his ice wall. "Something insane," Bakugo said, and for once there was no anger in his voice, just awe. The Nomu was 10 meters away, then 5. Izuku opened both eyes. The mega optic blast. No visor, no aperture control, no regulation, pure, unfiltered, dimensional energy pouring from both eyes at maximum output. The beam was wide enough to engulf the entire central plaza. Red light, blinding, roaring, alive, erupted from Izuku's eyes in a continuous torrent of concussive force that made his earlier maximum output look like a flashlight. It hit the Nomu dead on. For 1 second, the Nomu held its ground. Shock absorption working overtime. Its feet carved trenches in the concrete. Its muscles bulged. Its brain, that exposed, ugly brain, pulsed. 2 seconds. The Nomu's feet slid back. 3 seconds. Cracks appeared in the Nomu's skin. 4 seconds. The shock absorption failed. The saturation point was reached and exceeded. The dam broke. The Nomu launched off the ground like it had been hit by God's own fist. Straight up. Through the ceiling of the USJ dome, through the steel and concrete, into the sky, higher, higher, until it was a black dot against the clouds. Then it was gone. The beam kept going for another 2 seconds before Izuku squeezed his eyes shut and snapped his visor back on. The USJ dome had a gaping hole in its roof. Sunlight poured in. Dust and debris rained down. The ground where the Nomu had stood was a crater 5 meters deep. A trench extended from the crater to the far wall, carved by residual beam energy that had angled downward after the Nomu cleared the path. Izuku stood at the center of it all. His visor clicked back into place. His breathing was heavier. That blast had taken something out of him. Not much, but something. The silence lasted 7 full seconds. Then All Might arrived. He burst through the doors of the USJ. The real doors, not the hole in the ceiling. with a squad of pro heroes behind him. He was in his muscle form, blonde, towering, the symbol of peace. He stopped at the top of the stairs and looked down at the scene. Aizawa, wounded but alive, protected by Kirishima. Kurogiri, pinned against a wall by Bakugo's relentless explosions and Todoroki's ice. The remaining villains, frozen solid in Todoroki's perimeter ice. And at the center, a 15-year-old boy standing in a crater, visor glowing, with a hole in the ceiling where he'd punched a bioweapon into the stratosphere. All Might's smile flickered, just for a moment. Because in that moment, the number one hero felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Something that wasn't quite fear. Something closer to recognition. This boy reminds me of someone I've never met. Shigaraki was staring at Izuku too. His scratching had stopped. His hands were trembling. Kurogiri, get us out. The mist villain, barely conscious from Bakugo's assault, managed to open a portal. Shigaraki stepped through it. Before the portal closed, he looked back at Izuku one more time. I'll remember you, kid. You're gonna be a problem. I already am, Izuku said. The portal closed. Bakugo kicked the spot where Kurogiri had been. Damn it! They got away! They'll be back, Izuku said. We need to be ready. He turned to check on Aizawa. The teacher was conscious, like being supported by Kirishima and Sue. His arm was damaged, his face was bloody, but he was alive. Midoriya, Aizawa rasped. Sir, you took command. Someone had to. Aizawa looked at him, at the crater, at the hole in the ceiling, at the frozen villains and the controlled chaos of a battlefield that had been managed by a first-year student. Good work, Aizawa said. From Eraserhead, those two words were worth more than a medal. In the aftermath, Recovery Girl treated the injured. Police swarmed the facility. The media got wind of the attack and went berserk. Villains attack UA students was the headline on every news channel within the hour. But in the hallways of UA, the story that spread wasn't about the attack. It was about the boy who punched a Nomu through the ceiling with his eyes. Did you see the hole? Kaminari was practically vibrating. You could fit a bus through that hole. The creature is still in orbit somewhere, Yaoyorozu said, checking her phone. They haven't found it yet. Satellite tracking has it at approximately 4,000 meters and descending over the Pacific Ocean, Izuku said, walking past. Everyone turned to stare at him. I calculated the trajectory based on exit velocity and mass, he added, as if that was a normal thing to say. Uraraka grabbed his arm. Are you okay? That blast was insane. You took your visor off. I'm fine. Mild optical strain. Nothing significant. Izuku, you shot a monster into the sky with your eyes. That's not nothing significant. He looked at her. For a moment, just a moment, the tactical mask slipped. She saw the exhaustion underneath, the weight, the years of blindness and isolation and learning to control something that could end cities. I did what was necessary, he said. Softer now. Uraraka held his gaze. Then she smiled. Yeah, you did. Behind them, Todoroki watched. He'd been silent since the fight. Processing, he'd seen Endeavor fight. He'd seen All Might on television. He'd grown up around power. He had never seen anything like Izuku Midoriya. Recovery time. 2 weeks of reduced activity while the school beefed up security and the teachers healed. Aizawa returned wearing a cast on his arm and bandages on his face. His eyes were still sharp. The attack on USJ changed things. The mood at UA shifted. Students trained harder. Teachers pushed them more. The bubble of safety had been popped, and everyone felt the draft. But amid the tension, something else was building. The UA Sports Festival, the biggest stage in the hero world, broadcast nationally, watched by millions. A chance for students to showcase their abilities and attract attention from pro-hero agencies. For most students, it was an opportunity. For Izuku Midoriya, it was a formality. You're not nervous? Uraraka asked him the morning of the festival. About what? About performing in front of the entire country. Izuku adjusted his visor. The country should be nervous. Uraraka blinked. Then she burst out laughing. Okay, that was actually funny. I wasn't joking. That's what makes it funny. The sports festival opened with a bang. Literally. Fireworks, cameras, Present Mike's voice echoing across the stadium. Midnight on stage cracking her whip and explaining the rules. The first event, an obstacle race through UA's campus, 2 kilometers. Anything goes. The starting horn blared. Hundreds of students surged forward. The corridor was a bottleneck designed to force conflict immediately. Todoroki made his move first. A wave of ice covered the ground, freezing everyone's feet in place. He skated forward alone. Most students were stuck. Izuku was not stuck. He jumped the moment the horn blew. Not forward, up. A beam at the ground launched him over the crowd entirely. He sailed over the bottleneck, over the frozen students, and landed ahead of Todoroki. Todoroki's eyes widened. Izuku was already moving. The first obstacle, a field of robots, the same kind from the entrance exam. 1-pointers, 2-pointers, 3-pointers, and at the back, a 0-pointer. Izuku didn't slow down. A wide beam swept across the field at knee height. Every robot in the front row lost its legs. They toppled like dominoes. Izuku ran across their falling bodies. The 0-pointer loomed ahead, the same type he destroyed in the entrance exam. He didn't stop. He didn't even adjust his visor. He ran straight at it and fired a single beam through its center mass while still sprinting. The 0-pointer's power core exploded. The robot collapsed. Izuku ran through the gap between its falling halves. The stadium went insane. And Midoriya just destroyed a 0-pointer without even breaking stride. Present Mike's voice cracked. This kid is not human. Aizawa, on commentary duty, said nothing, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Second obstacle, the fall. A massive canyon with rope bridges and platforms. One wrong step and you plummet into the net below. Izuku looked at the gap. It was maybe 60 meters across. He fired at the ground, launched himself into the air, arced over the entire canyon, landed on the other side. He just skipped the obstacle, Present Mike said, sounding slightly offended. He just skipped it. Aizawa, is that legal? There's no rule against it, Aizawa said. There should be. Third obstacle, a minefield. The ground was littered with buried explosives. Touch one and you go flying. Behind Izuku, Todoroki and Bakugo were catching up. Todoroki on ice, Bakugo on explosions, both pushing their limits. Izuku surveyed the field. He could fly over it. He could blast a path through it, but he was already so far ahead that neither of them would catch him, even if he walked, so he walked. Casually, through the minefield, stepping precisely between the mines. His spatial awareness, honed through years of blindness, let him detect the slight elevations in the ground where mines were buried. He walked through the minefield without triggering a single mine. Is he strolling? Midnight asked from the stage. He's asserting dominance, Yaoyorozu observed from somewhere in the race. Currently fighting through the robot field, Izuku crossed the finish line first, by a wide margin. He wasn't sweating, he wasn't breathing hard. He turned around and watched the rest of the contestants arrive. Todoroki came in second, Bakugo third. Both of them were panting. Both of them were furious. The crowd was on its feet, not because of a close race, because they just watched someone make the UA. Obstacle course looked like a morning jog. In the stands, pro heroes were already making calls. Who is that kid? Hawks. The number 3 hero asked, leaning forward in his seat. Izuku Midoriya, his assistant said. Class 1A. Quirk, optic blast. Get me a meeting with him after this. Sir, he's 15. I know. Get me a meeting. I want first dibs on his internship. Endeavor was also in the stands. His flames burned a little hotter as he watched the replay of Izuku's run. His eyes flickered to Todoroki's second-place finish. His jaw tightened. Second event, the cavalry battle. Teams of 4. Wear headbands worth points based on your placement in the obstacle race. The first-place finisher's headband is worth 10 million points. Izuku had a 10 million point target on his forehead. Every team in the festival wanted his headband. This should be fun, he said, tying the headband around his visor. He picked his team fast. Uraraka, zero gravity for mobility. Tokoyami, dark shadow for defense and mid-range combat. Yaoyorozu, creation for utility and adaptability. Our strategy is simple, Izuku told them. Uraraka keeps us light. Tokoyami handles anyone who gets close. Yaoyorozu creates barriers as needed, and I handle everything else. Define everything else, Yaoyorozu said. Offense, defense, long-range suppression, crowd control. So everything else. The round started. Every team in the arena converged on Izuku's group. It was a massacre in their favor. Uraraka made the team nearly weightless. Izuku used ground blasts to launch them over charging teams. From above, he fired precision shots that knocked headbands off opponents' heads. Tokoyami's dark shadow swatted away anyone who got too close. Yaoyorozu created a titanium shield when Bakugo tried to blast them from the side. In 5 minutes, Izuku's team had accumulated 37 headbands. They were flying, literally flying. Uraraka's zero gravity plus Izuku's beam propulsion turned them into a hovering weapons platform. "This is unprecedented," Present Mike screamed. "Team Midoriya is just farming headbands. They're harvesting them like crops." Todoroki's team made a push. Ice surged across the ground. Dark Shadow recoiled from the cold. Todoroki himself reached for Izuku's headband. Izuku tilted his head. A micro beam hit the ice beneath Todoroki's feet. It shattered. Todoroki dropped 3 inches and lost his balance. Izuku plucked Todoroki's headband off his head as his team sailed overhead. "Thanks," Izuku said. Todoroki looked up at him with an expression that was 50% fury and 50% something that might have been admiration. The round ended. Team Midoriya, first place, by an absurd margin. Midnight announced the results. The crowd erupted. In the waiting room afterward, Todoroki found Izuku. "We need to talk." "Okay. My father is Endeavor, the number 2 hero. He created me, specifically, to surpass All Might. My ice comes from my mother. My fire comes from him. I've refused to use my fire side since I was a child. I will defeat you with my ice alone." Izuku looked at him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because when I beat you, I want you to know it was with only half my power, to prove I don't need him." Izuku was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that Todoroki did not expect. "That's stupid." Todoroki blinked. "Excuse me? Your fire is yours, not his. Limiting yourself to prove a point to your father means he still controls you. You want to beat me? Use everything you have, otherwise you're just giving me a handicap and I don't need one." He turned and walked away. Todoroki stood there, fists clenched, mind reeling. No one had ever said it to him that directly. No encouragement, no sympathy. Just the raw, tactical truth, "Your fire is yours," 3 words. And they cracked something open that Todoroki had kept sealed for years. The tournament bracket was announced. Single elimination, 1-on-1, the crowd was electric. The brackets were displayed on the massive screen. Izuku's path. First round, Ibara Shiozaki from Class 1B. Quarterfinal, the winner of Tokoyami versus Yaoyorozu. Semifinal, likely Bakugo. Final, likely Todoroki. The tournament began. Izuku versus Shiozaki. Shiozaki's quirk, vines. She could grow and control thorn-covered vines from her hair. She was good. She was experienced. She was a recommended student. She lasted 8 seconds. The match started. Shiozaki sent a wave of vines surging across the arena. Thick, fast, thorny. Izuku swept a beam across the base of the vines. They were severed instantly, cauterized by the concussive friction. The severed vines fell to the ground, twitching. Shiozaki's eyes went wide. She grew more, faster, thicker. A wall of thorns, Izuku fired a sustained beam. It cut through the vines like a laser through paper. The beam reached Shiozaki and hit her square in the midsection with enough force to launch her out of bounds. She landed on the grass outside the ring, conscious but stunned. Shiozaki is out of bounds. Midoriya wins. 8 seconds. The crowd didn't even have time to start cheering before it was over. There was a moment of confused silence, then a roar of reaction. 8 seconds! Present Mike was losing his mind. That might be the fastest match in sports festival history. In the stands, Hawks was already on his phone. Izuku walked back to the waiting room, calm, unhurried. The other students watched him pass, some with excitement, some with terror, some with both. Other matches progressed. Bakugo versus Kirishima. Bakugo won, but Kirishima pushed him. It took 3 minutes and Bakugo's biggest explosion yet to finally crack Kirishima's hardening. Credit to Kirishima. He went down fighting and smiling. Todoroki versus Sero. Sero wrapped Todoroki in tape. Todoroki froze him, froze the tape, froze the ring, froze the first 3 rows of the audience. Massive overkill. Todoroki looked angry about something. Tokoyami versus Yaoyorozu. Dark Shadow was relentless. Yaoyorozu created defenses, shields, flashbangs, barriers, but Dark Shadow adapted too fast. Tokoyami won, though Yaoyorozu made him work for it. Quarterfinal, Izuku versus Tokoyami. This one was interesting. Tokoyami's Dark Shadow was strong, a sentient shadow entity that attacked and defended with animal ferocity. In darkness, it was nearly uncontrollable in its power. In light, it weakened. Izuku knew this. Of course he did. He'd been cataloging his classmates' abilities since day 1. The match started. Dark Shadow surged forward, fast, powerful. A wall of darkness with claws. Izuku fired a wide beam. The light from the blast, pure red energy, blinding, washed over Dark Shadow. Dark Shadow screamed. It shrank. The light from Izuku's optic blast was functionally a spotlight turned up to 11. Dark Shadow retreated back to Tokoyami, whimpering. "Sorry, Tokoyami," Izuku said. "Bad matchup." He fired a low-powered beam at Tokoyami's feet. The blast knocked him off balance and out of bounds. "Midoriya wins." Tokoyami took the loss with grace. He nodded to Izuku on the way out. "You planned that from the bracket announcement." "I planned everything from the bracket announcement." "That's frightening." "Thank you." Semi-final, Izuku versus Bakugo. This was the match everyone was waiting for. The crowd was deafening. Present Mike was doing his job almost too well. Even Aizawa sat up straighter. Bakugo stepped into the ring with murder in his eyes. He was sweating, nitroglycerin pooling in his palms. His explosions would be at peak power. Izuku stepped in from the other side, visor humming, posture relaxed. "I've been waiting for this," Bakugo growled. "I know. I'm going to beat you. You're going to try." "Start!" Midnight called. Bakugo exploded forward. He was fast, faster than he'd been in the combat exercise. He'd been training, pushing his limits, adapting. His right hook came screaming in with an explosion behind it. Izuku dodged, but barely. The shockwave ruffled his hair. "He's faster," Izuku noted. "Good for him." Bakugo didn't stop. He chained explosions together. Right hook, left blast, aerial spin, downward slam. A brutal, relentless combo that turned the ring into a war zone. Izuku moved, dodging, calculating, reading. But Bakugo was adapting too. He wasn't throwing the same attacks from the combat exercise. He'd studied his own patterns and changed them. "You're learning," Izuku said, ducking under an explosion. "Shut up and fight." Izuku fought. Beam to the left. Bakugo dodged. Beam to the right. Bakugo used an explosion to redirect himself. Bakugo was using his blasts for three-dimensional movement, bouncing around the arena like a human pinball. The crowd was going nuts. "They're evenly matched," Present Mike yelled. "They're not," Aizawa said quietly, and he was right, because Izuku had been testing Bakugo for 30 seconds, learning his new patterns, his improved speed, his adapted combos. And now the testing phase was over. Izuku fired a beam at the ground between them. The concrete exploded upward, a cloud of dust and debris. Bakugo's vision was blocked. In that half-second of blindness, Izuku repositioned. He dropped to one knee and fired at a precise angle. Not at Bakugo, but at the metal railing on the edge of the ring. The beam hit the railing, ricocheted, changed direction by 42 degrees. The ricochet beam hit Bakugo in the small of the back. He lurched forward, off balance. Before he could recover, Izuku was already firing a second beam. This one directly at Bakugo's chest. Low power, non-lethal, but enough concussive force to send him sliding backward. Bakugo's heels hit the edge of the ring. He teetered. One more shot. Pinpoint. Just enough force. Bakugo went over the line. Bakugo is out of bounds. Midoriya wins. The stadium erupted. Bakugo was on his back outside the ring, staring at the sky. His chest was heaving. His palms were crackling uselessly. Izuku walked to the edge of the ring and extended his hand downward. Bakugo stared at it, at the visor above it, at the calm, unreadable face. "That ricochet shot," Bakugo said. "You used the railing. You improved your frontal defense. I had to find another angle. You adapted mid-fight. So did you. You were better today." Bakugo's jaw clenched. His hand twitched. For a long, long moment, Izuku thought he might slap the hand away. Bakugo grabbed it, pulled himself up. "Next time," Bakugo said, "I'll be faster." "I know you will." They walked off the ring in opposite directions. The crowd was still cheering. In the stands, Endeavor was frowning. All Might was smiling. Hawks was standing on his seat. The final. Izuku versus Todoroki. This was the one. The big one. 2 recommendation-level students. Fire and Ice versus interdimensional concussive energy. The crowd could feel it. That electric tension that hangs in the air before something legendary happens. Todoroki walked into the ring with a different energy than before. Something had shifted since their conversation. His eyes were conflicted, determined, scared. Izuku walked in the way he always walked in. "Ready. I've thought about what you said," Todoroki said. "And?" Todoroki's left fist clenched, then unclenched. "I'm still going to beat you with my ice." "Then you're going to lose." "Start!" Todoroki attacked immediately. A massive wave of ice, bigger than anything he'd used all tournament. It surged across the arena like a frozen tidal wave, 10 meters tall, covering the entire width of the ring. The crowd gasped. Izuku tapped his visor. adjusted the aperture to a focused beam. He fired. The beam cut through the ice like a hot knife through fog. A perfect tunnel, carved at chest height, bore through the entire glacier. Izuku walked through it. The walls of the tunnel were smooth, glazed by the friction of the beam. Steam drifted from the surfaces. He emerged on the other side calmly. "Your ice is static," he said. "My beams are kinetic. You're going to need more than that." Todoroki sent another wave. Bigger. Izuku cut through it again and again and again. Each time, Todoroki threw up more ice, and each time, Izuku carved through it like it was nothing. "This isn't working, and you know it," Izuku said, walking through the fifth tunnel. "Use your fire." "No. Then this ends now." Izuku fired a wide beam at the ground in front of Todoroki. The ice shattered. The concrete beneath cracked. The shockwave staggered Todoroki. Izuku pressed forward. Beam after beam, controlled, calculated, each one breaking Todoroki's ice faster than he could create it, each one pushing Todoroki closer to the edge. Todoroki was panting. The cold was getting to him, his own cold. His right side was frosted over. His movements were slowing. Using only ice was literally freezing him. "You're killing yourself," Izuku said. "Your body temperature is dropping. 3 more minutes at this rate and you'll have hypothermia." "That's my problem. It becomes my problem when they blame me for putting you in the hospital." Izuku stopped firing. He stood 10 meters from Todoroki. The arena was a mess of shattered ice and cracked concrete. "Use your fire, Todoroki. This fight deserves it. You deserve it. You don't know what he did to me." Todoroki's voice cracked. "You don't know what that power represents." "I know what my power represents," Izuku said. His visor glowed. "I was born with portals to another dimension behind my eyes. I spent 3 years blind because I couldn't control it. I destroyed my own home at age 4. My power terrified everyone around me, including myself." He took a step forward. "But it's mine, not the dimensions, not the physics. Mine. I chose what it represents, and you can too." Todoroki stared at him. His frost-covered body was shaking. His left hand, the fire side, was trembling. "Your fire is yours," Izuku said again. "Prove him wrong by being better than he ever was, with all of your power." Something broke. Something that had been frozen inside Todoroki for over a decade shattered like one of his own ice walls. His left side ignited. Fire erupted from Todoroki's body. Real fire. Massive, roaring flames that melted the ice on his right side and sent steam billowing across the arena. The temperature in the stadium jumped 10 degrees. The crowd screamed. Endeavor shot to his feet in the stands, his own flames flaring. "Shato!" Endeavor roared. There were tears in his eyes. Todoroki didn't hear him. He was looking at Izuku. "You wanted my full power," Todoroki said, flames and frost swirling around him like a storm made human. "Here it is." Izuku felt the heat from across the ring. He felt the cold too. Todoroki was using both simultaneously. Ice on the right, fire on the left. A perfect duality. For the first time all tournament, Izuku adjusted his visor to a higher setting. "Now we're fighting," Izuku said. Todoroki attacked. Fire and ice together. A lance of ice from the right, a gout of flame from the left. Simultaneous. From 2 different angles, Izuku fired at the ice, shattered it. The fire hit his left side. He rolled with it, using a ground blast to launch himself sideways and above the flames. Mid-air, he fired down at Todoroki. Todoroki threw up an ice wall. The beam punched through it, but the wall absorbed enough force to let Todoroki dodge. They clashed, over and over. Fire and ice met concussive energy in the center of the arena. The ground was destroyed. The air was a mix of steam, dust, and red light. The temperature fluctuated wildly, burning hot 1 second, freezing cold the next. It was the most spectacular fight the sports festival had seen in years. Maybe ever. But Izuku was still ahead, not because Todoroki was weak. Todoroki was incredible. Using his full power, he was a genuine threat. Fire and ice in combination was devastating. But Izuku had been fighting with his full power his entire life. Todoroki had been fighting with half, and those missing years of experience with fire showed. Todoroki's fire was raw. Powerful but unrefined. He was throwing it like a weapon he just picked up for the first time in a decade. Izuku saw the opening. Todoroki launched a massive combined attack. Ice from below, fire from above. A pincer. Inescapable. Izuku fired downward. Launched himself above both attacks. At the apex of his jump, he aimed both eyes at Todoroki through his visor. Focused beam. Maximum precision. The aperture narrowed to a single point. The beam hit Todoroki's chest, controlled, non-lethal. But at that output, with that precision, it was like getting hit by a truck condensed into a single point. Todoroki flew backward. He hit the boundary wall, cracked it, slumped. Midnight raised her hand. Todoroki is unable to continue. Midoriya wins the sports festival. The stadium exploded. Not just cheers, a primal, thunderous roar that shook the foundations of the arena. Students were on their feet. Pro heroes were clapping. Present Mike was doing something between commentary and a religious experience. Izuku Midoriya wins the UA Sports Festival. Ladies and gentlemen, remember this name. Izuku stood in the center of the destroyed arena. Steam and frost drifted around him. His visor glowed faintly. He was breathing hard. That fight had taken everything. He walked over to Todoroki. "You good?" Todoroki was sitting against the cracked wall. His flames had gone out. His ice was melting. But his eyes were clear, clearer than they'd been all year. "Yeah," Todoroki said. "I'm good." Izuku offered his hand. Todoroki took it. Izuku pulled him up. "Good fight," Izuku said. "I'll be stronger next time. I'm counting on it." They walked off the field together. The crowd was still going insane. In the stands, All Might was silent. His hands were folded. His smile was gone, replaced by something more honest. Respect. And something else. A question he couldn't quite articulate. A feeling that Izuku Midoriya was carrying something older than a quirk. Something that had been leading, fighting, and calculating long before this boy was born. But that was a question for another day. The award ceremony was brief. Izuku got gold, Todoroki got silver, Bakugo got bronze. He'd won his third-place match against Tokoyami with a strategy specifically designed to counter Dark Shadow's weakness to light, which meant he'd been studying his classmates too. Growth thought All Might placed the medals. When he put the gold around Izuku's neck, their eyes met. "You're remarkable, young Midoriya." "Thank you, sir." "Where did you learn to fight like that? To lead like that?" Izuku paused. That old feeling stirred again, deep, ancient. A flash of red behind his eyes that had nothing to do with his quirk. "Honestly," he said, "I think I've been doing it for a long time." All Might studied him, then he laughed. Big, booming, trademark. "Well then, keep it up. The world needs what you have." Izuku touched his visor. "That's the plan." After the sports festival, Izuku's reputation exploded, not just within UA nationally. The clips from his fights were everywhere. Social media, news broadcasts, highlight reels. The 8-second fight against Shiozaki became a meme. The Bakugo ricochet shot got analyzed on 3 separate hero commentary shows. The moment Todoroki used his fire was replayed so many times the video threatened to break the internet. And the shot that won the finals, that precise, surgical beam that ended one of the best fights in festival history, was being called the checkmate beam by fans online. Izuku didn't care about the fame. He cared about the fact that the League of Villains was still out there, Shigaraki was still planning, and the Nomu was just one weapon in what was likely an arsenal. But first, internships. Izuku received 4,782 internship offers, the most in UA history, more than double the previous record. He turned them all down except one. Not Hawks, not Endeavor, not Best Jeanist, Gran Torino, an old retired hero, All Might's former teacher, a man so old and so dangerous that his name still made villains from a previous generation flinch. "Why him?" Uraraka asked. "Because he knows something about power that the current generation doesn't," Izuku said. "How to control it without losing yourself." The internship was brutal. Gran Torino was 80 years old and moved like a bullet. His jet quirk let him bounce off walls, floors, and ceilings at blinding speed. For 3 days, his only instruction was, dodge. Izuku dodged. He tracked Gran Torino's movements with his spatial awareness, predicted trajectories, and adapted. By day 2, he was using beam ricochets to slow Gran Torino's movement, bouncing shots off walls to create zones of denial. "Not bad, kid," Gran Torino said, eating a taiyaki. "Your eyes are portals, huh?" "To a dimension of infinite kinetic energy." "Yes." "And you can control it?" "With the visor, yes. Without it, the output becomes uncontrollable." Gran Torino looked at him, really looked at him. Those ancient eyes had seen things. "There's something else in you, kid. Something that's been around before." Izuku went still. "What do you mean?" "I mean the way you move, the way you think, the way you lead. It ain't learned. It's remembered. I've seen it once before, in someone who carried more than just a quirk." He didn't explain further, but the words lodged in Izuku's chest like a splinter, remembered. That night, Izuku dreamed. He dreamed of red sunglasses, a yellow visor, a team of people he'd never met, a school that wasn't UA, a world where people with powers were hated instead of celebrated. He dreamed of a war, many wars, an endless series of battles fought by someone who looked like him but wasn't. Someone older, harder, someone who had lost everything and kept fighting. We were always meant to lead. He woke up gasping, his eyes flared. The visor caught the blast, but the inside of his visor glowed bright red for 3 seconds before the energy subsided. He sat in the dark for a long time. Then he got up, put on his visor, and went back to training. Some questions didn't have answers yet, but the mission was clear. Get stronger, prepare. Because what was coming was bigger than the sports festival, bigger than the league, bigger than anything UA had faced, and Izuku Midoriya would be ready. The stain incident happened on the third night of internships. Izuku was in Hosu City with Gran Torino when the call came. Tenya Ida, driven by rage and grief over his brother Tensei, the hero Ingenium, who had been crippled by the hero killer Stain, had gone after Stain alone. Izuku received Ida's distress signal on his phone, a location pin, nothing else. Go, Gran Torino said. Izuku went. He found them in an alley. Ida was on the ground, paralyzed by Stain's quirk, blood curdle activated by ingesting a target's blood. Stain stood over him, blade drawn, the hero killer's eyes blazing with that terrifying single-minded conviction. A third figure was there too, a pro-hero named Native, also paralyzed and bleeding. Stain had his sword raised over Ida. The killing strike, a red beam hit the sword. It flew from Stain's hand, embedded in the brick wall 30 meters away, glowing red-hot from the friction. Stain spun. His reflexes were extraordinary, the fastest Izuku had seen from any human. Izuku stood at the mouth of the alley, visor glowing, posture relaxed. Step away from him. Stain studied him. Those piercing eyes, the eyes of a man who had killed dozens of heroes he deemed unworthy, swept over Izuku like a scanner. Another child playing hero? Stain said. Another criminal playing judge, Izuku replied. Stain's lips curled, not quite a smile, something more dangerous. You have conviction. I can see it. You're different from these fakes. I'm different from everyone. Step away. Stain moved fast. 2 knives materialized from his bandages and flew at Izuku. Izuku tilted his head, 1 beam, 2 deflections. The knives sparked off the beam's concussive force and clattered to the ground. Stain closed the distance in a heartbeat. He was in Izuku's face with a new blade before the knives hit the ground. Fast. Terrifyingly fast. Izuku ducked. The blade sliced air where his neck had been. He fired a point-blank beam at Stain's torso. Stain twisted. The beam grazed his side instead of hitting center mass. The hero killer used the alley wall to vault overhead, landing behind Izuku, blade coming for the back of Izuku's neck. Izuku spun and fired. Stain dodged again. He was reading the beam's trajectory through Izuku's head position. He's tracking my eyeline, Izuku realized. He knows the beam comes from my eyes, so he watches where I look and moves before I fire. Smart. Very smart. But Izuku was smarter. Ida, Izuku said. Formation Alpha. Ida was still on the ground, still paralyzed, but he heard the command. It was a reference to a formation they'd practiced in class, a coordinated pincer movement, except there was no Formation Alpha. There was no pincer. Izuku said it because he knew Stain would hear it too and expect an attack from Ida's direction. Stain's eyes flickered toward Ida. 1/10 of a second, Izuku fired, not at Stain. At a dumpster lid, propped against the wall to Stain's left, the beam hit the metal lid, ricocheted, changed angle by 61 degrees. The ricochet beam hit Stain in the back of the right knee. Stain's leg buckled. He went down on 1 knee, his teeth bared in pain and surprise. Izuku was already moving. 3 quick steps forward, his visor hummed at combat intensity. You have conviction, Stain, Izuku said, standing over him, but you lack vision. He fired. Point-blank range, low power. Enough to incapacitate, not kill. The blast hit Stain in the chest and launched him backward. He hit the brick wall at the end of the alley. The bricks cracked. Dust flew. Stain's body was embedded 3 inches into the masonry. He slumped, conscious, barely, blood dripped from his mouth. His eyes were still open, still burning. Vision, Stain repeated, almost laughing. That's ironic, coming from a boy who shoots lasers from his eyes. Concussive force, not lasers. There's a difference. Stain actually laughed at that, a broken, bloody laugh. You're the real thing, kid. You're what a hero should be. Izuku didn't respond to that. He turned to Ida. Can you move? Ida's paralysis was wearing off. He managed to sit up. His face was a mess of blood, tears, and shame. Midoriya, I'm sorry. I came here for revenge. We'll talk about it later. Can you move? Yes. Then help me secure him before he decides to get back up. Todoroki arrived 30 seconds later. He'd been interning nearby and had seen the GPS ping. He rounded the corner, saw Stain embedded in a wall, saw Izuku standing calmly, and stopped. Did you already? Yes. By yourself? The ricochet did most of the work. Todoroki looked at the dumpster lid. At the angle, at the wall, he ran the geometry in his head. That's a 60-degree bank shot off an uneven surface, compensating for beam spread and target movement. 61, Izuku corrected. Todoroki shook his head slowly. You're unreal. Pro heroes arrived minutes later. Endeavor, of all people, was among them. He surveyed the scene. Stain captured, 3 students relatively unharmed, an alley that looked like a war zone. Who did this? Endeavor demanded. I did. Izuku said simply. Endeavor stared at him. The number 2 hero, towering and flaming, stared at a 15-year-old in a visor. You took down the hero killer. Alone. I had tactical support from Ida and Todoroki. Todoroki started to say, no, you. But Izuku cut him off with a look. The credit sharing was strategic. Students weren't supposed to engage villains without supervision. By distributing the credit, Izuku reduced the risk of punishment for anyone involved. Todoroki understood immediately. Ida caught on a second later. The official report listed it as a collaborative effort. The unofficial story, the one that spread through hero agencies and online forums like wildfire, was very different. The Visor Kid soloed the hero killer. Stain himself confirmed it. When the police loaded him onto the transport, he looked back at Izuku one final time. Remember what I said, kid. You're real. Stay real. Then the doors closed and the hero killer was gone. Izuku stood in the alley. Red and blue lights from the police cars danced across his visor. Todoroki was beside him. Ida was behind him, being treated by paramedics. Midoriya, Todoroki said. Yeah? That thing you said, about your power being yours, not the dimensions. What about it? I think you were right, about all of it. Izuku looked at him. I usually am. Todoroki's eyebrow twitched. Was that a joke? Barely. For the first time in their entire acquaintance, Todoroki smiled. Small. Barely there, but real. You're strange, Midoriya. I've been told. The aftermath of Hosu was complicated. Publicly, the hero killer's capture was attributed to Endeavor's agency with student assistance. Privately, every hero agency in the country updated their files on Izuku Midoriya. Threat assessment. Extreme. Trajectory. Number 1. Timeline. Accelerated.All Might requested a private meeting with Izuku after the internships ended. They met in a conference room at UA. All Might was in his deflated form, thin, skeletal, coughing blood into a handkerchief. The symbol of peace's true form, Izuku sat across from him. He'd figured out All Might's secret within the first month of school, the time limit, the injury, the deterioration. It wasn't hard if you watched the patterns. You know, All Might said. It wasn't a question. About your condition? Yes, the limited transformation time, the old injury, the fact that you're running out of power. All Might's eyes widened slightly. Then he laughed, coughed, laughed again. I shouldn't be surprised. You see everything, don't you? I see angles. Everything else follows. All Might leaned forward. Young Midoriya, I brought you here because I need to tell you something. I have a quirk that can be passed on. It's called One for All. I've been looking for a successor. Izuku was silent for a moment. You're offering it to me? I considered it. Before the entrance exam, I was searching for someone with the right heart and will. But after watching you realized I don't need it. All Might's smile was sad, proud, a little relieved. You have everything you need, young man. Power, skill, heart, intelligence. What you have isn't what I can give. It's something else entirely, something I've never seen. Izuku thought about the dreams, the memories that weren't memories, the instincts that felt inherited. There's someone else who might need it more, Izuku said. Someone who has the heart but needs the power. Do you have someone in mind? Izuku considered. His mind sorted through candidates automatically. Heart, will, compatibility, potential. Mirio Tagada, he said. 3rd year. Permeation, quirk. He has the will, the skill, and the body to handle a power amplification. and he already fights like a number 1. All Might blinked. You know about Tagada? I've watched every publicly available recording of him. His quirk is already powerful, but it has inherent limitations. One for All could remove those limitations and give you a successor who can carry the title for decades. All Might stared at him. Then he shook his head, laughing. You terrify me a little, young Midoriya. That seems to be a theme, in the best way. All Might stood, extended his hand. Whoever you were before, whoever gave you those instincts and that mind, I'm glad you're here. The world needs you. Izuku shook his hand. I know. He left the meeting and walked back to the dorms. The sun was setting over UA, painting the campus in shades of gold and red. Red. Always red. Izuku touched his visor. Behind the ruby quartz, behind his closed eyelids, the infinite dimension pulsed. Patient. Eternal. Waiting. We were always meant to lead. Yeah, Izuku whispered. And we're just getting started. Back at the dorms, evening. Class 1A was in the common room. The mood was different after everything. The USJ, the sports festival, the internships, Hosu, they weren't just classmates anymore. They were something closer to a unit. Uraraka was on the couch, arguing with Ashido about the best flavor of mochi. Ida was organizing his notes with military precision, his movements still a little stiff from the stain encounter. Todoroki was in the kitchen, attempting to cook. His technique was violent, but the results were surprisingly edible. Bakugo was in the corner, doing push-ups. He'd been doing push-ups every evening since the sports festival. Nobody commented on it. Everybody noticed. Kaminari was showing Jiro something on his phone. Kirishima was lifting a couch with one arm while Sero sat on it and pretended to be unbothered. Yaoyorozu was reading a tactical journal that Izuku had lent her. Izuku walked in. The room didn't go silent. It wasn't like that, but there was a subtle shift, an awareness, like a compass adjusting to north. Uraraka waved him over. Settle this. Strawberry or matcha? Neither. Red bean. Red bean? Ashido looked personally offended. That's an old person flavor. It's the correct flavor. You're wrong. I'm rarely wrong. Name one time you were wrong. Izuku thought about it, genuinely. I'll get back to you. Uraraka snorted. Ashido threw a pillow at him. He caught it without looking. These moments mattered. Not because they were dramatic, not because they were strategic. They mattered because they were real. Because somewhere underneath the visor and the tactical genius and the dimensional portals behind his eyes, Izuku Midoriya was a 15-year-old kid who liked red bean mochi and caught pillows without looking, and had friends who threw them at him. The balance between the weapon and the human being was a tightrope he walked every day. Some days the weapon side won, some days the human side did. Today was a human day. He sat down between Uraraka and Ida, accepted a cup of tea from Yaoyorozu, listened to Kaminari tell a joke that was objectively terrible, but somehow still funny because of the delivery. And for a few hours, the dimensional energy behind his eyes was quiet. But quiet never lasts. The League of Villains was regrouping. Shigaraki was scratching, planning, recruiting. The defeat at USJ, and especially the humiliation of watching his ultimate weapon, the Nomu, get blasted into orbit by a student, had ignited something dangerous in him. New alliances were forming. New weapons were being built. The villain underworld was shifting, and at the center of the shift was a question that had started circulating in dark places. Who is the kid with the visor? They were coming. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. And when they came, it would be with everything they had. Izuku knew. He'd known since USJ, since Stain, since the dreams started, since the ancient feeling behind his eyes told him that this was just the beginning. At UA, Nezu was making his own preparations. Additional security, training intensification, partnerships with pro-hero agencies. The principal had been watching Izuku since the entrance exam, and what he saw confirmed what his analytical mind had suspected. The boy was a force multiplier. Wherever Izuku went, the people around him got sharper, faster, more organized. He elevated everyone. Aizawa saw it too. He'd never admitted aloud, but Class 1A was the best class he'd ever taught. And the reason was sitting in the second row, wearing a visor, calculating the future 12 steps ahead. But that future was accelerating. The training camp was next. Then the provisional license exam. Then the things beyond that. The things that no one could predict yet, but everyone could feel approaching. War was coming, not today, but soon. And when it came, Izuku Midoriya would be standing at the front, where he belonged, where he had always belonged. Visor humming, mind calculating, eyes burning with the light of another dimension. Not because he was chosen, not because he was lucky, not because some ancient power was handed to him by a predecessor, because he chose himself. Every day, every fight, every impossible situation, he opened his eyes, and the world changed. The day before the training camp, Izuku stood on the roof of the UA dormitory at sunset. The sky was red. The wind pulled at his hair. His visor caught the last light of the day and turned it crimson. Below, his classmates were packing, laughing, preparing. Behind him, footsteps. "You always stand on roofs?" Todoroki asked, joining him at the edge. "Better angles." "Of course." Todoroki stood beside him. They looked out at the city together. "Do you ever think about what comes after UA? After all this?" "I think about what comes during," Izuku said. "The after takes care of itself if you handle the during correctly. That's either profound or evasive." "It's both." Todoroki almost smiled again. He was doing that more often now. The ice inside him, the metaphorical kind, was thawing. Slowly, but noticeably, Midoriya. "Yeah? Thank you for what you said at the festival about my fire being mine." Izuku nodded. "It is. I know that now." Todoroki paused. "You changed things. For me, for the class, maybe for all of UA. I didn't change anything. I just pointed out what was already there. That is changing things." They stood in comfortable silence. The sun dropped below the horizon. The sky turned from red to deep purple. "Whatever happens at the training camp," Todoroki said, "I'll be ready. I know. Because of you, because of yourself, I just gave you the push." Todoroki extended his right hand. Ice crystals danced across his knuckles. Then his left hand, flames flickered around his fingers, both sides complete. "No more half measures," Todoroki said. "No more half measures." Izuku agreed. They went back inside. Behind them, the first star of the evening appeared. Red, bright, burning in the darkening sky like an eye, like a visor, like a promise. Izuku Midoriya was 15 years old. He was the strongest student in UA history. He carried the tactical mind of a man who had led wars in another life. He wore a visor that held back the power to split continents, and he was just getting started. The villains were coming. The world was watching. And somewhere deep inside, deeper than the quirk, deeper than the bones, something ancient and undying burned steady and true. A leader's fire, a warrior's resolve. A legacy written in red light across the canvas of time. The UA beginning saga was over. The real story was about to begin. And Izuku Midoriya, commander, tactician, weapon, hero, was ready. He was always ready. He opened his eyes, and the world was never the same. The bus ride to the training camp took 4 hours. Izuku spent 3 of them with his eyes closed, not sleeping, mapping. He'd memorized the route from the moment they left UA, counting turns, tracking elevation changes, building a 3-dimensional model of the terrain in his head. By the time the bus pulled into the mountain rest stop, he could have drawn a topographical map of the surrounding forest from memory. The wild pussycats were waiting for them. 4 pro heroes in cat-themed costumes standing on a cliff overlooking a massive forested valley. Mandalay, Pixie Bob, Ragdoll, Tiger. Their base was at the bottom of the valley. The students were at the top. "Welcome to the Beast's Forest," Mandalay announced, smiling with entirely too much enthusiasm. "Your lodge is at the base of this mountain. You have until noon to reach it." "That's only a few kilometers," Ida observed. Pixie Bob grinned. "Through my earth beasts." She slammed her hands on the ground. The forest below rumbled. Trees shook. Massive constructs of dirt and stone rose from the earth. Golems the size of houses, dozens of them, filling the forest like an army. "You're walking through that," Mandalay said. "Your training starts now." Students panicked. Students screamed. Pixie Bob's earthwave shoved them off the cliff and into the tree line. Izuku landed on his feet. Around him, classmates were crashing through branches, tumbling down slopes, scrambling to orient themselves. "Form up." Izuku's voice cut through the chaos. No hesitation, no warm-up. "Todoroki, ice path down the slope. Bakugo, air support, keep the high ground. Ida, scout ahead, report back every 60 seconds. Yaoyorozu, communication devices, now." Yaoyorozu was already creating earpieces. Todoroki froze a path down the mountainside. Bakugo launched himself upward with a blast and didn't argue. He could see 3 earth beasts converging from altitude, and altitude was where he needed to be. The first golem came through the trees, 20 feet tall, stone and packed dirt. It swung a fist the size of a car at Kirishima, who hardened and caught it, but the impact drove him back 10 feet, his boots carving trenches in the soil. Izuku fired, one shot. The beam hit the golem's shoulder joint and sheared the arm clean off. The severed limb crashed to the forest floor. Kirishima, shatter the core. Center mass, 2 feet below the neck. Kirishima didn't ask how Izuku knew where the core was. He punched. The golem crumbled. They moved through the forest like a military unit. Izuku called positions, identified threats, and directed fire with a calm that bordered on eerie. When Kaminari got flanked by 2 golems, Izuku bounced a beam off a rock face and took out both with a single ricochet. When Tokoyami's dark shadow started getting too aggressive in the deep forest shade, Izuku fired a wide beam overhead. The light flash pulled Dark Shadow back into manageable range. It took Class 1A 90 minutes to reach the lodge. Mandalay had expected 4 hours. Pixie Bob was vibrating with excitement. Who's the kid giving orders? The one with the visor? Izuku Midoriya, Mandalay said. Class 1A? I want him. In like 3 years, when he's legal to recruit, dibs. You can't call dibs on a student. I just did. At the lodge, Aizawa laid out the training schedule. 5 days. Intensive quirk development. The goal was to push every student past their current limits through targeted individual training programs. Izuku had already designed his own. He'd spent the bus ride, the hour he wasn't mapping terrain, writing individual training assessments for every member of Class 1A. Weaknesses, development paths, specific drills. He handed the notebook to Aizawa without comment. Aizawa read it. His eyebrow rose, then the other one. You wrote training programs for your entire class. Suggestions. You're the teacher. Aizawa flipped through the pages. Bakugo, precision detonation at range, reduce reliance on close combat. Todoroki, simultaneous dual element deployment, eliminate transition lag between ice and fire. Uraraka, combat applications of zero gravity, learn to weaponize the environment rather than relying on touch. Ida, unpredictable movement patterns, break the linear habit. Every assessment was accurate. Every drill was practical. Several were things Aizawa himself had planned to implement. These are good, Aizawa said. I know. Aizawa's eye twitched. Don't push it. The training was brutal. The Pussycats pushed Class 1A through hell. Physical conditioning, quirk extension, combat drills, rescue scenarios. Students collapsed. Students vomited. Mineta cried twice. Bakugo cried 0 times, but punched a tree hard enough to split it because his AP shot wasn't precise enough for the 3rd consecutive attempt. Izuku trained with the class during the day. He ran every drill, pushed every exercise, matched every student. But his real training happened at night. After lights out, he slipped into the forest alone. Aizawa knew, Izuku had asked permission, and Aizawa had granted it with a look that said, "Do not make me regret this." In the darkness of the beast's forest, Izuku trained his precision. He set up targets, rocks, trees, specific branches at specific heights. Then he fired. Not direct shots. Ricochets, double ricochets, triple ricochets, beams that bounced off stone, then off water, then off the flat face of a cliff to hit a target he couldn't see from his firing position. He calculated every angle in his head. Adjusted for surface composition, granite reflected differently than sandstone, water differently than ice. He mapped the coefficients of restitution for his beam against 14 different materials and committed them to memory. By the 3rd night, he could hit a target around 2 corners using a triple ricochet with 93% accuracy. By the 4th night, 98. On the 4th night, he also pushed his output. Alone in a clearing far from the lodge, he opened his visor aperture wider than he had since the USJ. Not maximum, but close. The beam carved a trench through the forest floor 40 meters long. Trees on either side of the trench were stripped of their bark by the shockwave. The ground glowed faintly with residual thermal energy. Izuku closed the aperture, stood in the silence, felt the pressure behind his eyes. That infinite, patient thing that never stopped pushing. He could feel it growing. Not the power itself. That was constant, limitless, but his connection to it. His ability to channel it, shape it, direct it. Like a river carving its own canyon deeper year by year. And in that silence, standing in a trench of his own making, the dreams came again. Not in sleep this time, a waking flash, a room. Metal walls, a round table. People in uniforms, blue and gold and red. A woman with white hair and dark skin, a man covered in blue fur, a girl who walked through walls, a man made of steel, and at the head of the table, someone in a visor, giving orders. The voice was calm, measured. The voice of someone who had sent people into battle and brought them home again more times than anyone should have to. The voice sounded like his. Izuku blinked. The vision faded. He was alone in the forest. The trench smoked gently at his feet. He touched his visor. The ruby quartz was warm. "Who were you?" he asked the darkness. The darkness didn't answer, but the pressure behind his eyes pulsed once, steady like a heartbeat, like recognition. He went back to the lodge, said nothing to anyone. Day 5, the last night of camp. The students were exhausted, improved, and riding the high of visible progress. Bakugo's AP shot could now hit a target the size of a coin at 50 meters. Todoroki could deploy ice and fire simultaneously with zero transition lag, a seamless duality that made him twice as dangerous. Uraraka had learned to use debris as projectiles, touching rubble and releasing it at targets with devastating accuracy. Ida had broken his linear patterns and developed what he called reciproburst, a short, explosive acceleration that changed direction mid-stride. The class was stronger. Measurably, undeniably stronger. Dinner was raucous. The Pussycats had organized cookouts. Students were laughing, eating, throwing food. Even Bakugo was eating without scowling, which for him was the equivalent of a warm hug. Izuku ate with Uraraka, Ida, and Todoroki. They were talking about the provisional license exam, 2 weeks away. "You seem tense," Uraraka said to Izuku. "I'm always tense." "More tense than your regular tense." He looked at her. She was perceptive, more than most people gave her credit for. Behind the round face and the cheerful energy was a mind that read people with uncomfortable accuracy. "Something feels off," he admitted. "The air pressure changed 40 minutes ago, and a barometric drop consistent with an approaching front, but the forecast was clear. Maybe it's just weather. Maybe." It wasn't weather. At 9:47 p.m., the forest ignited, not Todoroki's fire, not a natural blaze. A wall of blue flame erupted across the eastern perimeter of the camp, cutting off the primary escape route. The fire was precise, deliberately shaped, deliberately placed. Not to burn the camp, to cage it. Izuku was on his feet before the first scream. "Contact! Eastern perimeter! All students to the lodge! Now!" His voice carried across the campsite like a gunshot. Students who had been laughing 3 seconds ago were moving. The Pussycats were already in motion. Mandalay's telepathy activated, broadcasting warnings to every mind in range. Multiple contacts approaching from the east, south, and northwest. Ragdoll reported, her quirk scanning the forest. "I count 26. No, more. They're still coming." Izuku processed that number. 26 minimum. At USJ, they'd had maybe 70 low-level thugs. This was different. 26 or more villains deployed to a specific, remote location meant planning, resources, and coordination. This was the League, and they'd leveled up. "Aizawa," Izuku said. The teacher was beside him, capture scarf unfurled, eyes sharp. "I see it. They boxed us in with the fire. 3 approach vectors, 1 cut off. They want to funnel us." "Toward what?" A massive shape moved through the burning tree line. Then another. Then 3 more. Nomus. Not 1. 5. They were different from the USJ model. Smaller, faster, more varied. One had wings. One had blades for arms. One was covered in what looked like organic armor plating. But they all had the same dead eyes, the same exposed brains, the same bioengineered wrongness. "They brought an army," Aizawa said. "They brought an army for me," Izuku corrected, because he could see it now, the deployment pattern. The Nomus weren't spread evenly. They were converging on a single point. The fire wasn't designed to trap the class. It was designed to separate them from him. The funnel wasn't pointing toward the students. It was pointing toward Izuku. From the burning forest, a voice, amplified by something electronic, carrying over the crackle of flames. "Good evening, Visor Kid." Shigaraki's voice, casual, almost bored. "I've been watching your highlights. Very impressive. But I have a question. A simple one. What are you?" Izuku didn't answer. He was already calculating. "See, your quirk doesn't make sense," Shigaraki continued. Portals to another dimension, infinite energy, that's not a quirk, that's something else. And my teacher is very, very interested in something else. His teacher. All for one. Izuku filed that away. "So we're going to run a little test tonight. Nothing personal. Well, a little personal. You did blast my Nomu into orbit, that was rude." The 5 Nomus charged. Class 1A. Izuku's voice hit a register that froze everyone in place. Not loud, commanding. The voice of someone who had given orders in 100 battles he couldn't remember. Tiger formation. Todoroki, left flank, ice wall, slow the southern approach. Bakugo, right flank, airborne, keep the winged Nomu grounded. Yaoyorozu, rear guard, barricade the lodge, protect anyone who can't fight. Ida, perimeter runner, relay messages between positions. Dark Shadow is strongest in this darkness. Tokoyami, you're on point with me. He gave 12 more orders in 4 seconds. Every student received a specific assignment. Every position covered a weakness. Every pairing maximized complementary quirks. The class moved, not like students, like soldiers. Pussycats, the fire perimeter. If that ring closes, we're trapped. Mandalay nodded and her team surged toward the flames. Tiger was already tearing through burning trees with his bare hands, creating fire breaks. The first Nomu reached the camp, the armored one. It came through the tree line like a freight train, smashing through a wooden fence and charging straight for Izuku. Izuku fired, full combat output. The beam hit the Nomu's chest plate and held. The organic armor absorbed the impact. The Nomu kept coming. Organic plating, Izuku said. Concussive resistant, interesting. He adjusted direct, fired at the ground in front of the Nomu. The earth exploded upward, creating a wall of dirt and stone. The Nomu smashed through it, but the debris threw off its trajectory by 2 degrees. 2 degrees was enough. Izuku sidestepped the charge and fired at the back of the Nomu's knee, the one joint the armor didn't cover. The beam hit the exposed tissue. The Nomu's leg buckled. It went down, sliding across the campground, tearing up grass and dirt. Tokoyami's Dark Shadow surged forward and slammed into the downed Nomu from above. In the nighttime darkness, Dark Shadow was enormous, a beast of living shadow with strength that rivaled the Nomu's own. It pinned the creature and hammered it into the earth. "Hold it," Izuku ordered. He fired a precision beam at the crack between 2 armor plates on the Nomu's torso. The beam wormed through the gap and hit something vital inside. The Nomu spasmed and went limp, 1 down, 4 to go. The blade-armed Nomu had reached Todoroki's position. It was fast, faster than the armored one, and its arm blades cut through Todoroki's ice wall like scissors through paper. Todoroki responded with fire, a wave of flame that would have melted steel. The Nomu recoiled. Its blades weren't heat-resistant. The edges glowed red, then white. It screamed a hollow, manufactured sound and pulled back. "The blades conduct heat," Todoroki called across the camp. "Fire is effective!" "Press it," Izuku called back. "Don't let it reset," Todoroki pressed. Fire and ice in alternating waves freeze the ground beneath the Nomu's feet, then blast it with flame when it stumbled. The Nomu's movements became jerky, uncoordinated. The thermal shock was cracking its blade arms. On the right flank, Bakugo's in the air. The winged Nomu had taken flight, and Bakugo had launched himself to meet it. They clashed above the tree line, explosions against talons, in a brutal aerial dogfight that lit up the night sky. "Get down here and fight me properly, you ugly pigeon!" Bakugo roared, firing a concentrated AP shot at the Nomu's wing joint. The shot hit. The Nomu's right wing crumpled. It spiraled downward, crashing through the canopy. Bakugo followed it down, explosions blazing, and the sounds of combat that came from the trees were violent and final. 2 more Nomus were pushing through the southern approach. Kirishima and Sato met them head-on. Hardened fists and sugar-enhanced strength against bioengineered muscle. They were holding, but barely. These Nomus weren't as specialized as the others, but they were strong and relentless. Izuku fired across the campground. 2 shots. The first hit the lead Nomu's ankle and dropped it to 1 knee. Perhaps the second hit the trailing Nomu in the chest and staggered it backward into Shoji, who wrapped 6 arms around it and held it in place while Sero bound it in tape. "Kaminari!" Izuku shouted. "Discharge into the tape! Now!" Kaminari ran up and pressed both hands against the tape-wrapped Nomu. 1,000,000 volts coursed through the binding. The Nomu convulsed and went rigid. The lead Nomu was back up. Kirishima met it face to face, unbreakable form, fully activated, his entire body a lattice of hardened crimson. He caught the Nomu's fist, held it. His feet carved trenches in the dirt, but he held. "Now would be good, Midoriya." Kirishima yelled through gritted teeth. Izuku fired a beam that hit a metal support post from the camp's supply shed. The beam ricocheted off the post at a 31-degree angle and hit the Nomu in the temple from a direction it couldn't see. The creature's head snapped sideways. Kirishima used the opening to drive an uppercut into its jaw that sent it airborne. Sato jumped and hammered it back down. It didn't get up, 4 Nomus down. 1 remaining. The 5th one hadn't attacked yet. It was standing at the edge of the burning tree line, watching. Larger than the others, not by much, but enough. Its body was lean, muscled, built for speed rather than brute force, and its eyes, unlike the others, had something behind them. Not intelligence, exactly, but awareness. It was watching Izuku specifically. "That one's the test," Izuku said. It moved. Fast. Faster than the USJ Nomu. Faster than anything Izuku had faced. It covered the 50 meters between the tree line and Izuku's position in under a second. A blur of black muscle and exposed brain, closing the distance with a speed that didn't belong to something that size. Izuku fired. The beam hit center mass. The Nomu didn't absorb it, didn't tank it, it deflected it. Its body shifted at the point of impact, the skin rippled like water, and the beam's energy was redirected sideways, cutting a gash through the campground but hitting nothing vital. "Energy redirection," Izuku said. "Not absorption. Deflection." The Nomu swung. Izuku dodged. Barely. The fist cratered the ground where he'd been standing. The shockwave threw him sideways. He rolled. Fired again. The Nomu deflected again. This time the redirected beam cut through a storage shed. Izuku ran calculations in his head. The deflection wasn't perfect. There was an angle threshold. The Nomu's skin could redirect energy that hit it within a certain range of angles, but if the angle of impact was steep enough, outside the deflection window, the energy would penetrate. The problem was finding that angle while a creature that moved at highway speeds was trying to take his head off. "Todoroki," Izuku called. "Ice floor. Now, entire campground." Todoroki didn't hesitate. A sheet of ice spread across the camp in 2 seconds flat. The Nomu's feet lost traction. It slid. Just a fraction. Just enough. And its next attack went wide. Izuku used the moment. He fired at the ice beneath the Nomu's feet. The beam hit the ice, superheated it, turned it to steam in a microsecond. The sudden thermal burst created a cloud of white vapor that engulfed the Nomu. It couldn't see, but Izuku didn't need it to not see. He needed the angle. He fired at the ice behind the Nomu. The beam bounced off the smooth surface. Ice was an excellent reflector for concussive energy. He'd tested it on night 3 and hit the Nomu from behind at a 67-degree angle to the skin surface. The deflection failed. The beam punched through the Nomu's back and out its chest. The creature staggered, turned. Those aware eyes locked onto Izuku through the steam, and then something happened that made every student in the camp stop breathing. The Nomu spoke. Data collected. Its voice was hollow, synthetic, a recording device built into its throat, not a mind forming words, but the message was clear. The Nomu collapsed. The light in its eyes went dark. In the forest beyond the fire, Shigaraki's amplified voice returned. Fascinating. Concussive energy from an extra-dimensional source, redirected through environmental surfaces, adaptive tactical thinking in real time. You know what's funny? Visor Kid? My teacher said you'd be interesting. I thought he was overselling it. A pause. He wasn't. Warp gates opened across the forest, Kurogiri's portals. The remaining low-level villains, the ones fighting the pussycats, the ones scattered through the trees, were pulled through. The fires began to recede as the villain maintaining them vanished through a portal. "We got what we came for," Shigaraki said. "Your data, your output readings, everything my teacher needs to understand what you are. Consider this a preview. Next time, I won't bring Nomus." A final pause. Longer. Waited. "Next time, I'll bring him." The portals closed. The voice cut out. The forest fell silent, except for the crackle of dying flames and the heavy breathing of 20 students who had just survived a coordinated military assault. Izuku stood in the center of the campground. The ice was melting around him. The steam was clearing. 5 Nomus lay broken across the camp. The supply shed was destroyed. 3 trees had been leveled by redirected beam energy. The ground was cratered, scorched, and frozen in alternating patches. The professional heroes arrived 14 minutes later. A rapid response team led by Endeavor with a squad from the Hero Public Safety Commission. They came fast. They came ready for war. They found the war already over. Endeavor surveyed the scene. His flames cast long shadows across the destroyed campground. His eyes moved from Nomu to Nomu, from crater to crater. From the ice walls to the blast marks to the tactical positions where students had held their ground, he looked at Izuku. Izuku looked back. Endeavor said nothing. But for the first time in his career, the number 2 hero looked at a student and felt something he hadn't felt since facing All Might for the first time, outclassed. Behind Endeavor, the other pros were having their own moments. A hero from the response team, a woman with an analysis quirk, was scanning the downed Nomus. These are new. The biological engineering is advanced. This one has an energy deflection membrane. She turned to her colleague. A 15-year-old broke through it. With a ricochet off ice, Izuku said, walking past. The angle was the key. Deflection membranes have an angular threshold. Anything above 60 degrees of incidence penetrates. The analyst stared at him. How did you determine the threshold angle during combat? Process of elimination. First 2 shots were deflected at roughly 40 and 50 degrees. The physics suggested a cutoff somewhere between 55 and 70. I aimed for 67. It worked. He kept walking. Toward Aizawa, who was sitting against a tree being treated by one of the pussycats for a gash across his shoulder. Report, Aizawa said. 5 Nomus neutralized, 0 student casualties, injuries are minor, Kirishima has a hairline fracture in his left hand, Bakugo has second-degree burns on his right forearm. From the winged Nomu's talon friction, Todoroki has mild hypothermia in his right arm from overuse. Structural damage to the camp is significant but contained. The League retreated voluntarily. They achieved their objective. Which was? Data collection. They were testing me, measuring my output, my adaptive capacity, my tactical methodology. The 5th Nomu recorded everything. Shigaraki said his teacher wants to understand what I am. Aizawa's jaw tightened. His teacher. All for one. The name landed like a stone in still water. Aizawa's eyes, both of them, fully open, fixed on Izuku. You know about All for One? I know enough. Ancient villain, quirk theft, the reason One for All exists, the reason All Might has a hole in his stomach. Aizawa stared at him for a long, silent moment. How long have you known? Since I noticed All Might's time limit. The injury pattern suggests a directed attack from something that tears rather than cuts. A quirk designed to steal or destroy. Cross-reference with historical villain records and the existence of a transferable quirk like One for All, and the picture becomes clear. You deduce the existence of the most dangerous villain in history from All Might's injury pattern and publicly available records. It wasn't difficult. Aizawa leaned his head back against the tree and closed his eyes. Midoriya, you are, without question, the most terrifying student I have ever taught. So I've been told. That night, nobody slept. The camp was evacuated. Students were transported back to UA under heavy escort. The mood on the bus was grim. Students sat in silence, processing what had happened. Some of them were shaking. Ashido held Jiro's hand. Kaminari stared out the window without blinking. Mineta, to his credit, didn't cry. He just sat very still and very quiet and looked older than he had that morning. Bakugo sat in the back with his arms crossed. His forearm was bandaged. His jaw was set. He hadn't said a word since the fight, but his eyes burned. Not with fear. With something that looked a lot like readiness. Todoroki sat next to Izuku. Neither spoke for the first hour. Then Todoroki said quietly, "They'll come again." "Yes." "For you specifically." "Yes." "Then we need to be ready specifically." Izuku looked at him. "We?" "The class. All of us. You can't fight All for One's army alone, and you're smart enough to know that." "I wasn't planning to." "Good." Todoroki paused. "Because I didn't use my full power during the fight. I held back fire because of the forest. Next time, I won't be in a forest. Next time, you won't need to hold back." Todoroki knew it was enough. Uraraka found Izuku after they arrived back at UA. He was in the common room, sitting in the dark, visor on the table in front of him. His eyes were closed. She sat down across from him. Didn't speak. Just sat. After a while, he said, "They came for me. I know. Everyone who was hurt tonight was hurt because of me. Because they're trying to figure out what I am. That's not your fault. It's my responsibility. Those are different things." He opened his eyes. No visor. His eyelids stayed shut, but the faintest red glow leaked through. The light from another dimension pressing against the thin barrier of human skin. "I don't know what I am," he said. "Not completely. There's something else. Something older than the quirk. I dream about it. I feel it when I fight, when I lead." Uraraka looked at the red light seeping through his closed eyelids. Most people would have been afraid. She wasn't. "Whatever you are," she said, "you're also Izuku. That's the part that matters." He was quiet for a long time. "Thank you, Uraraka." "Ochako." He paused. "Thank you, Ochako." She smiled. It was a small smile, but it filled the room in a way that the red light behind his eyes never could. She left. He put his visor back on, sat in the dark for another hour, then he went to bed. And for the first time since the dreams began, he didn't fight them. He let them come. The dream was longer this time, clearer. A mansion, vast, somewhere in a country that wasn't Japan. A school, not for heroes, but for something else. Something that came before the word hero was ever attached to people with powers. A school for survival, for people who were born different and hated for it. He walked the halls, not as a visitor, as the person who ran it. Students looked at him with respect, with fear, with something that lived in the space between both. He carried the weight of their safety in his chest like a stone. A voice, bald head, wheelchair, eyes that saw everything, said, "You are the leader they need." Scott. The name hit like a thunderclap. Not recognition, deeper than that. Remembrance. He stood in a war room, maps on every wall, threats circling from every direction, a team of extraordinary people looking to him for the plan. And he gave them one. He always gave them one, because that was the job, not the power, not the visor. The job was to stand in front of impossible odds and find the angle that nobody else could see. The dream shifted. He was older now, harder. The visor was yellow, not red. The uniform was blue and gold. He stood on a battlefield, charred earth, burning sky, and everything had gone wrong. The plan had failed. The team was scattered. He was alone. And he recalculated, found a new angle, gave new orders through a communicator that crackled with static, pulled victory from the teeth of defeat through sheer, stubborn tactical brilliance. He won. He always won. Not because he was the strongest. Because he refused to stop thinking. The dream faded. The last image was a pair of red sunglasses on a nightstand, a hand reaching for them in the morning light. A face he almost recognized, older, sharper, more weathered, but the jawline was the same. The way the mouth set in a thin, determined line was the same. Scott. Izuku woke up. It was 4 a.m. His visor was on the nightstand beside his bed, exactly where the sunglasses had been in the dream. He reached for it, put it on, opened his eyes. The dorm room materialized in red-tinted clarity. His room, his world, his life. But the other life was there too, underneath, running parallel like a river beneath ice. He got up, got dressed, went to the roof. The sun wasn't up yet. The sky was that deep pre-dawn blue that makes everything feel honest. Scott Summers, he said to the empty air. The name felt true in his mouth. Not his name, but connected to him. A previous draft of the same person, he didn't understand the mechanism. Reincarnation, dimensional bleed-through, genetic memory from a timeline that shouldn't exist. It didn't matter. The effect was the same. He was carrying the tactical instincts, the leadership patterns, and the combat geometry of a man who had led a team of extraordinary people through an impossible world. And that man's power, the concussive blasts from another dimension channeled through the eyes, had followed him here, into a new body, a new world, a new war. Izuku touched his visor. "I don't know everything about you yet," he said, "but I know enough, and I'll carry it right." The pre-dawn sky didn't answer, but the pressure behind his eyes pulsed steady, acknowledged. He went back inside to train. The weeks after the training camp were chaos. The Hero Commission launched an investigation into UA's security. News outlets ran 24-hour coverage. Parents threatened to pull their children from the school. The phrase, "Is UA safe?" became the most searched query on every platform in Japan. Nizu handled the public side with characteristic precision. UA transitioned to a dormitory system. All students living on campus under constant protection. New security measures went up, sensor grids, automated defense systems, pro-hero patrols on rotating schedules. But in the private meetings, the ones Izuku wasn't supposed to know about but did, the conversation was different. They know about him, Nezu told the faculty. The League now has detailed combat data on Midoriya's quirk, output levels, tactical patterns, adaptive methodology. They know what they're dealing with. And what are they dealing with? Present Mike asked. Nezu adjusted his tie. Something we don't fully understand ourselves. Gran Torino visited UA the following week. Officially, he was consulting on security improvements. Unofficially, he pulled Izuku aside and they walked the perimeter of the campus together. "You've been having the dreams," Gran Torino said. Not a question. Izuku didn't ask how he knew. "They're getting clearer. I see a school, a team, a man in a visor. His name was Scott Summers." Izuku stopped walking. Gran Torino kept going for a few steps, then turned. His face was older than old, carved from the same stone as the mountains, but his eyes were sharp. "Don't look so surprised. You think you're the first person in history to carry something from before? Quirks are less than 200 years old, but there are accounts, ancient ones, of people who remembered things they shouldn't, lives they never lived, skills they never learned." The quirk research community calls it resonance memory. Most scientists dismiss it, but you don't. I watched a man carry a power called One for All, a quirk that accumulates the strength of every person who held it before. Each wielder leaves something behind. Instincts. Echoes. If one quirk can carry the ghost of its previous users, who's to say the soul can't do the same? Izuku stood very still. "I'm not saying I understand it," Gran Torino continued. "I'm saying I've been around long enough to know that the world is bigger than what we can measure. Your quirk opened portals to another dimension at age 4. You dream about a man who had the same power in a different world. You fight and lead like someone with a lifetime of experience you've never had." He stepped closer. Those ancient eyes bore into Izuku's visor. "Whatever Scott Summers was, whatever he carried, it's in you now. Not as a passenger, as a foundation. You were built on what he left behind." Izuku's throat was tight. "Does anyone else know?" "No, and it should stay that way. People aren't ready for the idea that heroes can inherit more than quirks. It would complicate things. It already complicates things. For you, not for them. That's the job, kid. You carry the complicated parts so everyone else can focus on the fight." Gran Torino paused. "Sound familiar?" It did. It sounded exactly like something Scott Summers would have said. "Yeah," Izuku said quietly. "It does." Gran Torino nodded. "Good. Now stop standing around and go prepare for your license exam. You've got a war coming, and wars require credentials. The Provisional Hero License Exam. Takoba National Stadium. 15 schools. 1,500 students. 100 license slots." The setup was simple. The execution was anything but. A massive urban simulation zone, 6 square kilometers of fabricated cityscape, complete with buildings, streets, infrastructure, and hundreds of civilian role actors scattered throughout. The objective: protect the civilians, neutralize opposing students, and score enough points to earn a license. The catch: every other student was also trying to score points, and the fastest way to score was to take them from someone else. It was a war of all against all, played on a city-sized chessboard with the entire hero industry watching. Izuku walked into the staging area and immediately drew attention. The visor was distinctive. The sports festival footage had made his face, or at least the lower half of it, nationally recognizable. Students from other schools pointed, whispered, studied him with a mix of fascination and wariness. "That's Midoriya," someone from Shiketsu High said. "Optic blast. He put a softball into orbit, and a Nomu into the stratosphere," another added, "and the hero killer into a wall. How do we fight that? We don't. We avoid him." Not everyone shared that philosophy. SAGA Academy, an all-girls school known for producing tactical fighters and support heroes. Their teacher, a woman named Emi Fukukado, hero named Miss Joke, had spent the 2 weeks since the sports festival designing a counter-strategy for exactly one person. "Listen up," she told her class in their preparation session. "Izuku Midoriya's quirk operates on a single principle: linear concussive projection from his eyes. He compensates for this with ricochets and environmental manipulation. The beam goes where he looks. If you control where he looks, you control where the beam goes." She distributed diagrams, eye-line maps, ricochet probability zones, angular approach vectors that minimize the chance of being in his firing arc. "Your strategy is simple. Surround him. Maintain positions outside his eye line. Force him to choose a target, while the other 9 of you close in from angles he can't cover simultaneously. He has 2 eyes. You have 20 sets of hands. Overwhelm the geometry." It was a good strategy. One of the best anyone had designed against him. It was not good enough. The exam began. The horn blared. 1,500 students flooded into the urban zone. Izuku moved immediately, not into the chaos, above it. A ground blast launched him to the roof of a 4-story building. From up high, he could see the entire zone. He cataloged the terrain in seconds. Building heights, street widths, choke points, lines of sight, reflective surfaces, glass windows, metal fixtures, puddles on the streets from a simulated rain system. Every potential ricochet angle within a 300-meter radius was mapped and stored. Class 1A, Channel 2, he said into his earpiece. Yaoyorozu had created communication devices for the class before the exam. Todoroki, take positions north. Establish ice control on the main avenue. Funnel opposing students toward the eastern district, where Bakugo's team can engage. Uraraka, you're with Asui and Sero. Hit the rescue zones first. Civilian protection scores are worth more than eliminations, and they're less contested. Ida, mobile relay between teams. Go. The class moved. 20 students operating as 5 coordinated teams spread across the urban zone with purpose and precision. Other schools were fighting as individuals or loose groups. Class 1A fought as an army. Izuku operated alone. By choice, he dropped from the rooftop and entered the streets. Moving fast but not running. A controlled pace that let him scan every corner, every window, every potential ambush point. He found his first opponents 3 blocks in. A team of 4 from Ketsubutsu Academy. They saw him. They froze. "It's him," one of them whispered. Izuku didn't give them time to strategize. 3 shots, one through a window that ricocheted off a metal filing cabinet inside the building and tagged the rearmost student through the back wall. 1 direct hit on the lead student, 1 off the wet pavement that skipped upward and caught the 3rd under the chin. The 4th student put his hands up and said, "I yield. I literally yield." 12 seconds. 4 eliminations. He kept moving. Block by block, he cleared the urban zone like a surgeon excising tissue. Every shot was calculated. Every ricochet was planned. He used windows, car hoods, lampposts, puddles, and the metal frames of bus stops to redirect his beams around corners, through buildings, and into targets that never saw him. In the observation room, the examiners watched monitors in stunned silence. "He's not using direct shots," one examiner observed. "Over 60% of his eliminations are ricochets. He's conserving his direct eye line," another said, "keeping his beam trajectory unpredictable. If opponents can't predict where the beam will come from, they can't dodge it. His elimination rate is unprecedented." On the screens, Izuku turned a corner and walked directly into the Sei Academy ambush. 10 students, positioned in a perfect semicircle, each one standing at a calculated angle, designed to be outside his primary firing arc. They'd studied his footage. They knew his beam came from his eyes. They'd arranged themselves so that he couldn't hit more than one of them without turning his head. And the moment he turned, the others would close in from his blind spots. "Now," their captain shouted. They attacked simultaneously from 8 different directions. Izuku didn't turn his head. He fired straight ahead, at nothing. The beam hit the glass facade of a building 20 meters ahead of him. The glass was tempered. It didn't shatter. It cracked and partially reflected. The beam split, not evenly, not predictably. The glass fragmentation scattered the beam into 5 separate vectors, each one weaker than the original, but still carrying enough concussive force to knock a person off their feet. 3 of the scattered beams hit 3 of the encircling students. They flew backward. The remaining 7 adjusted. They'd planned for ricochets. Their formation had accounted for bounce angles off the standard surfaces in the arena. They had not accounted for beam fragmentation through tempered glass. Izuku was already moving. He sprinted toward the building he'd hit, dropped into a slide, and fired upward at a metal awning overhead. The beam bounced off the awning and rained down on 2 more students who'd been approaching from his left flank. 5 down. 5 to go. Ah! The Sei captain was shouting orders. "Close the distance. Get inside beam range. He can't ricochet in close quarters." She was wrong. 3 students rushed him. Close range. Arm's reach. One had a binding quirk, ribbons of energy that wrapped around targets. Another had hardened fists. The 3rd was fast, speed-type quirk, blurring forward. Izuku didn't fire a beam. He pulled a chunk of concrete from the ground, a piece dislodged by an earlier blast, and threw it. Not at the students, at the metal lamppost to his right. The concrete hit the lamppost. It rang like a bell. The sound disoriented the speed-type student, who relied on auditory processing for her quick reaction time. She flinched for 1/10 of a second. Izuku closed the distance on her and tagged her elimination target, the small device on every student's shoulder, with his bare hand. Then he dropped, spun, and fired a micro-beam at the pavement between the other two close-range fighters. The concussive blast pushed them apart. He tagged one during the stagger. The other he hit with a direct beam at minimum power. She went down, 8 of 10 eliminated. The remaining 2, including the captain, backed away. Their formation was destroyed. Their counter-strategy was in pieces. How? The captain asked, genuinely. Not anger, bewilderment. We studied everything. Every fight, every angle. We had the geometry locked. Izuku stood in the center of their ruined ambush. Not a scratch on him. His visor caught the artificial sunlight of the arena and gleamed. You studied the beam, he said. You forgot to study the person firing it. The beam is a tool. I'm the weapon. He tagged the captain's elimination target. She didn't resist. The last Sei student turned and ran. Izuku let her go. She wasn't a threat, and chasing a fleeing opponent was a waste of time. He checked his elimination count. 43. The exam had been running for 18 minutes. He completed his 100th elimination at the 31-minute mark. Along the way, he'd also rescued 14 civilian actors, carrying 2 out of a simulated building collapse and directing a rescue operation that saved 12 more using Uraraka, Asui, and Sero as his remote team. His total score triggered the pass condition faster than any examinee in the exam's history. The examiner, a grizzled pro named Yokumiru Mera, who looked like he hadn't slept since the Meiji era, stared at the results printout. He passed, Mera said. In 31 minutes, the exam runs for 2 hours. His colleague leaned over. What's his total score? Mera showed him. The colleague sat down. That's not a passing score. That's everyone else's score. Mera rubbed his eyes. I need to go home. Izuku received his provisional license at the ceremony. It was a small card. Official. Heavy with implication, he held it up and looked at it. His name, his photo, visor and all, his quirk registration, a license to protect. Todoroki passed too, along with Bakugo, Uraraka, Ida, Yaoyorozu, and the rest of Class 1A. Every single one of them. The first time an entire class had passed the provisional exam together in over a decade. Congratulations, Mera said to the class. He sounded like congratulations physically pained him. You're all provisionally licensed heroes. Please don't destroy anything. He looked at Izuku when he said that last part. No promises, Izuku said. Mera's eye twitched. 2 days after the exam, the big 3 came to Class 1A. Mirio Togata, Nijire Hado, Tamaki Amajiki, the top 3 students in UA. 3rd years. The best of the best. Nijire was a whirlwind of energy and questions. Your visor is so cool. How does it work? Is the beam hot? Can you see colors through it? Why red? Do you dream in red? Tamaki was pressed against the wall, muttering something about wanting to be a clam. Social anxiety incarnate and Mirio. Mirio walked in with a grin so wide and so genuine that it bordered on weaponized optimism. Blonde, built, blue eyes that radiated an almost all-might level warmth. Hi, I'm Mirio Togata. Nice to meet you all. Let's fight. The class blinked. Let's what? Kaminari asked. Fight, all of you, right now. Aizawa-sensei said I could. It'll be fun. Aizawa was leaning against the wall. He looked at the class with an expression that said, this is going to be educational and you are going to hate it. They went to the training ground. Mirio stood at one end. The entire class stood at the other. Rules are simple, Mirio said. Try to hit me. I'll try to hit you. Don't hold back. He was through the floor before anyone moved. Mirio's permeation quirk let him phase through solid matter, through the floor, through walls, through people. He came up behind Kirishima and tapped him on the shoulder. Kirishima spun. Mirio was already gone. He emerged from the ground behind Tokoyami, tagged Dark Shadow before the entity could react, and sank into the floor again. He dismantled the class in 90 seconds. Ida couldn't catch him. Mirio phased through the ground whenever Ida got close. Todoroki's ice and fire hit nothing. Mirio was incorporeal when the attacks arrived, and solid when they passed. Bakugo fired explosion after explosion into the ground, the walls, the air, and hit nothing but concrete. Uraraka almost got him. She scattered debris across the training ground and activated her quirk on all of it, creating a field of floating obstacles that made Mirio's emergence points unpredictable. He had to spend an extra second finding solid ground to stand on. She used that second to lunge at him. Mirio grinned, phased through her hand, and tapped her elimination point. Good thinking! Almost had me! One by one, the class fell, until only Izuku was left. Mirio emerged from the wall to Izuku's right. Izuku didn't fire. Mirio paused. Not gonna shoot? Not yet. Mirio grinned wider. Smart. Let's see why they call you the strongest first year. He dove into the ground. Izuku stood still, eyes tracking behind the visor. Counting seconds. Mirio's quirk had a rhythm. When he phased, he couldn't breathe. He'd mentioned it casually and Izuku had filed it away. That meant he had to surface periodically. The intervals were consistent. Roughly 4 seconds submerged, 1 second surfaced. 4 seconds. Izuku waited. Mirio burst from the ground behind him. Izuku sidestepped, not away from Mirio but toward the wall, and fired at the floor. Not at Mirio, at the floor itself. The beam cratered the concrete in a 10-meter radius, shattering the surface into loose rubble. Mirio phased into the damaged floor and immediately had a problem. Permeation let him pass through solid matter, but the floor wasn't solid anymore. It was a shifting mass of broken concrete, gravel, and dust. When he tried to emerge, the ground gave way under his feet. He stumbled. 1 second of stumble. Izuku fired. Not at Mirio's body. The beam would pass through him if he activated his quirk. Izuku fired at the remaining intact floor directly adjacent to Mirio. Like the last solid surface within Mirio's reach, the beam destroyed it. Mirio was now standing in a crater of loose rubble with no solid ground to phase into. He could still activate his quirk, but he'd fall. Straight down, through the rubble, through the foundation, into whatever was below. And when he deactivated to breathe, he'd be in the dark, in the earth, with no clear surface to emerge from. Izuku had removed Mirio's battlefield. Oh, Mirio said, looking at the destroyed floor around him. The grin didn't fade, but it changed. Something sharper entered his eyes, something that recognized the mind behind the visor. He lunged at Izuku directly. No phasing, straight physical assault. Because in that moment, phasing was a liability. Izuku met him, not with a beam. Close range, against a fighter as fast as Mirio, he'd miss. He met him with geometry. He sidestepped Mirio's punch by exactly the distance required to redirect his own momentum into a spin. As he spun, he fired a beam at the wall behind Mirio. The beam ricocheted and hit a support column on the far side of the training ground. That ricochet hit a metal equipment rack. That ricochet came at Mirio from a direction he couldn't predict. It hit Mirio in the back of the knee. The third year's leg buckled. He caught himself fast, talented, incredibly well-trained, but for half a second he was off balance. Izuku fired a direct beam. Minimum power, at Mirio's chest. Mirio had two choices, phase and fall into the destroyed floor, a dangerous recovery situation. Or take the hit. He took the hit. The beam knocked him backward 3 meters. He skidded, caught his footing on a piece of intact floor at the crater's edge, and raised both hands. I yield! Wow! Wow! He was beaming, literally glowing with enthusiasm. There was a scorch mark on his uniform and his knee was bruised, and he looked like someone who just received the best birthday present of his life. You broke the floor. Mirio laughed. You destroyed my phasing surface. Nobody has ever thought to do that. You turned my own quirk against me. The class was staring. Kaminari's mouth was open wide enough to catch rain. Jiro had her phone out. She'd been recording. Kirishima was gripping Bakugo's shoulder with one hardened hand. Bakugo wasn't even pushing him off. He was too busy staring. He beat Mirio, Uraraka said. He beat Mirio, Ashido repeated louder. The number 1 third year, Todoroki said. Quiet. Processing. In the back, Aizawa was leaning against the wall. His mouth had done the thing again. The almost smile. Mirio walked up to Izuku and extended his hand. His grip was firm. His eyes were earnest. That was incredible. You saw a solution to a problem that shouldn't have a solution, and you found it in, what, 10 seconds? 7. 7. Mirio laughed. You're something else. Midoriya. Izuku studied him. The openness, the power, the warmth that radiated from Mirio like sunlight through a window. You are too, Izuku said. In fact, I think you're the right person for something important. Mirio tilted his head. What do you mean? When the time comes, you'll know. Mirio didn't understand, but something about the way Izuku said it, the weight, the certainty, stuck. It lodged somewhere in Mirio's chest and stayed there. Okay, Mirio said, I'll hold you to that. They shook hands again. Two people standing in a crater, surrounded by rubble, with 20 students and two pro heroes watching. And something passed between them that nobody else could see. A recognition. Not of power, of purpose. Work studies began the following week. Most of Class 1A dispersed to various hero agencies. Bakugo went to Best Genist and hated every second but came back with sharper technique. Todoroki went to Endeavor's agency, a choice that surprised everyone except Izuku, who understood that confronting the source of your pain was a form of strength. Uraraka went to Ryukyu's agency, where the Dragon Hero's combat style complemented her own quirk in ways that would show results for years. Izuku went back to Gran Torino, but this time, Gran Torino took him somewhere new, a nondescript building in downtown Tokyo. 3rd floor, no signage, the kind of door that didn't want to be noticed. Inside, Detective Naomasa Tsukauchi. Izuku knew the name, All Might's closest civilian ally, man whose quirk was a human lie detector. Tsukauchi was polite, professional, but his eyes had the weight of someone carrying information he wished he didn't have. Midoriya, thank you for coming. Gran Torino said it was important. It is. Tsukauchi placed a file on the table between them. It was thick. Manila. Izuku's name was printed on the cover in block letters. For the past 8 months, my division has been investigating a pattern in villain activity. Specifically, we've been tracking the League's interest in what we're calling mutation-class quirks, quirks that behave less like evolved traits and more like external forces channeled through a biological host. He opened the file. Izuku saw his own photograph on the first page. Energy readings from the sports festival. Spectral analysis from the USJ. Output measurements that required scientific notation. Your quirk is the most prominent example. The energy you produce doesn't originate in your body. It comes from somewhere else, a dimension we can't access or measure. Your eyes are the conduit. I know all this, Izuku said. I know you do. This is the part you don't know. Tsukauchi flipped to the back of the file, a section marked Unknown Origin in red ink. Inside the section was a photograph. Izuku stopped breathing. A man, tall, lean, athletic build beneath a blue and gold uniform. A visor across his eyes, not ruby quartz, but the same design principle. Red tinted, a single band with an adjustable aperture. The uniform had an X across the chest, a symbol Izuku had never seen in any hero registry. The man looked like he could have been Izuku's older brother. Where did you get this? Izuku said. His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. It was found in an archive beneath the ruins of a facility in upstate New York, USA. The facility was destroyed approximately 70 years before quirks first appeared. The archive was sealed in a vault designed to survive a nuclear strike. Tsukauchi paused. Let that settle. The photograph was labeled with a name and a designation. The name was Scott Summers. The designation was Field Leader Xmen. Izuku stared at the photograph, at the visor, at the jawline, at the posture, straight, commanding, carrying the weight of something immense. We were always meant to lead. His power, Tsukauchi said carefully, is described in the documents as optic blasts, concussive force channeled from a non-baryonic dimension through the ocular nerve. The physics are identical to your quirk, Midoriya, not similar, identical. Izuku closed the file. Gently, his fingers lingered on the cover. There's a theory, Tsukauchi said, fringe, unproven, that certain quirks aren't mutations at all, that they're echoes, patterns from previous existences carried forward through mechanisms we don't understand. The quirk research community has a term for it. Resonance memory, Izuku said. Tsukauchi blinked. You know? I've been dreaming about him for months. I didn't have a name, now I do. He stood up, picked up the file, held it at his side. Does All for One know about this? Tsukauchi's expression told Izuku everything. He does, Izuku said. That's what the training camp was about. He wasn't just collecting combat data, he was confirming the origin. All for One has existed for over 100 years, Tsukauchi said. It's possible he's encountered this archive himself. If he understands what your quirk truly is, a conduit to an external dimension, he may believe he can steal it and wield it. Can he? We don't know, Izuku nodded. He turned toward the door. Midoriya. He stopped. Whatever that photograph means, whatever Scott Summers was, you're here now, in this world, with us. Don't lose yourself in someone else's history. I won't, Izuku said. His history is my foundation, not my destination. He left the building. The file was in his bag. Scott Summers' photograph pressed against his notebooks. He walked 3 blocks before he stopped, leaned against a wall, closed his eyes behind the visor. Scott Summers, field leader, X-Men. A man who had the same power, the same curse, the same dimensional connection, who wore a visor because the alternative was destruction, who led a team through wars that should have been unwinnable, who was hated by the world he protected and protected it anyway. Izuku understood now. Not everything. There were decades of history in that photograph that he'd never fully recover. But the core of it. The reason the tactical instincts felt inherited. The reason the leadership came naturally. The reason the visor felt less like a medical device and more like an identity. He'd been here before. Different body, different world. Same fight. He opened his eyes, straightened up, kept walking. He said nothing to anyone. Not Todoroki, not Uraraka, not All Might. This was his to carry, not because he didn't trust them, because some knowledge is load-bearing. It only works if the right person holds it. That night, he sat in his dorm room with the file open on his desk. He studied the photograph until he could draw it from memory. Then he closed the file, put it in the bottom drawer of his desk, and locked the drawer. "Thank you," he said to the photograph through the wood, "for everything you left me. I'll use it well." He went to bed. He slept soundly for the first time in weeks. No dreams. He didn't need them anymore. He knew who he was. All Might found Izuku 2 days later. Not in a meeting room this time. In the teacher's lounge after hours, when the building was empty. All Might was in his true form, skeletal, sunken, diminished. He was sitting in a chair by the window, watching the sunset. "Sit down, young Midoriya." Izuku sat. All Might was quiet for a moment. The sunset painted his thin face in shades of orange and red. He looked tired. Not the normal kind of tired, the kind of tired that comes from knowing you're running out of road. "My power is almost gone," All Might said. "One for all is passing from me. I can hold my muscle form for perhaps 30 minutes on a good day. Soon it will be 20, then 10, then none. I know. I've been thinking about what you said about Mirio Togata. And? You were right. I've begun training him. He has the heart, the will, the body. He'll be a fine successor." Izuku nodded. "He will." All Might turned to look at him. Those sunken eyes, the eyes that had once been the brightest symbol of hope in the world, were wet. I want to tell you something I've never told anyone. Not my teacher, not my sidekick, not even Night Eye. Izuku waited. "I'm afraid," All Might said. "Not of dying, of what happens to the world when I'm gone. I've been the symbol for so long that I don't know if the world can stand without me, and that terrifies me, because it means I failed. A true symbol of peace would build a world that doesn't need him." The words hung in the air between them. Honest, bleeding. Izuku was quiet for 10 seconds. Then he spoke. "You didn't fail. The world isn't going to collapse when you're gone. It's going to transform, and it'll be hard. It'll be painful. Villains will rise. People will be afraid. But the generation you inspired, the heroes you taught, we don't need a symbol. We need what you already gave us. The belief that it's possible to protect everyone. The knowledge that someone tried. That's not a legacy that dies with your quirk. That's a legacy that compounds. Every hero you inspired inspires 3 more. Every life you saved creates someone who saves others. The pillar doesn't fall when you step aside, All Might. It grows, because you built it out of people, not power." All Might stared at him. The tears that had been sitting in his eyes fell. He didn't wipe them away. "How old are you again?" All Might whispered. 15. "You don't talk like you're 15. I've been told." All Might laughed. It was a small, broken sound, but genuine. "Toshinori," he said. "What?" "My name. My real name. Toshinori Yagi. I'd like you to know it." Izuku understood the weight of that. The most famous hero in the world, offering his real name, not as a title, but as a trust. "Thank you, Toshinori." All Might reached across the space between them and put his bony hand on Izuku's shoulder. It was feather-light. The hand of a man who had once punched with the force of a hurricane. "You're going to be fine, young Midoriya. Better than fine. You're going to be the greatest hero this world has ever seen, and you won't need a symbol to do it. You'll just need that visor and that mind. And the people around me, and the people around you." All Might squeezed his shoulder. "Don't forget that part. Never." They sat in the teacher's lounge until the sunset faded and the first stars appeared. Two men who carried the weight of worlds, one passing his burden to the next generation, the other already carrying a burden that predated this life entirely. All Might left first. At the door, he paused. Izuku. First name. No honorific. The intimacy of it was startling. If things get bad, really bad, don't try to carry it alone. That was my mistake. Don't make it yours. I won't. All Might smiled. The real smile. Not the trademark grin, the genuine human smile of Toshinori Yagi. Then he was gone. Izuku sat in the empty lounge for another hour. The stars brightened. The campus went quiet. He touched his visor, felt its weight, felt the infinite pressure behind his eyes, steady as a heartbeat. I'm ready, he said. 3 weeks later, All for One made his move. It happened in Kamino, a district on the edge of Yokohama. The Hero Public Safety Commission had been tracking League activity in the area for weeks. Chatter about a major operation, movement of resources, Nomu sightings. The commission organized a raid. A coalition of top heroes, All Might, Endeavor, Best Jeanist, Edgeshot, Mount Lady, Gang Orca, and a dozen others, deployed at midnight. What they found was a trap. Not for the heroes. For the hero students who were watching. Izuku, Todoroki, Bakugo, Ida, Yaoyorozu, and Kirishima were on the edge of the Kamino district. They'd followed the operation independently. Yaoyorozu had tracked the commission's movements using a transmitter she'd placed during the investigation. They were there as observers, backup, a contingency. They weren't supposed to be seen, but All for One had known they'd come. The first sign was the sky. It turned red. Not sunset red, deep, arterial red, like looking through ruby quartz. A dome of crimson energy descended over a 12-block radius, sealing the area like a lid on a pot. Inside the dome, the pro-heroes were engaged with the League. All Might was fighting Shigaraki and a squadron of high-end Nomus. The other pros were scattered, handling lieutenants and fodder. Outside the dome, Izuku and his team were cut off. What is this? Kirishima pressed his hardened hand against the dome's surface. It crackled with energy. His hand was pushed back. A barrier, Yaoyorozu said, analyzing the energy signature with a device she'd created. The energy is familiar. Izuku touched the dome. His visor flickered. The pressure behind his eyes surged, not in pain but in recognition. This barrier is made of the same energy as my quirk, he said. Everyone looked at him. All for One has a quirk that replicates other quirks, Izuku continued, or something close to mine. He's using dimensional concussive energy to create a containment field. Can you break through it? Todoroki asked. Breaking through a barrier made of my own energy type would require output beyond what the barrier can absorb. It's possible. But if I miscalculate, the barrier could reflect the energy back and level this block. So what do? Ida asked. We don't break through it. We go around it. Izuku scanned the barrier. It was a dome, curved, continuous, energy flowing in a pattern. But every pattern had a flaw. Every system had a seam. There, he said, pointing to a point on the dome's surface roughly 50 meters away near the ground. The energy flow converges at nodes. Between nodes, the barrier is thinnest. That point, where the curvature changes near the sewer entrance, has a transition gap approximately 3 centimeters wide. 3 centimeters, Bakugo repeated. We can't fit through 3 centimeters. We don't need to fit through it. We need to fracture it. Todoroki, Ice Lance maximum precision at that point. Bakugo, AP shot immediately after. The thermal and kinetic shock in sequence will stress the gap, and I'll follow with a focused beam to crack it open. Will that work? Kirishima asked. It's thermodynamics and material science applied to energy barriers. Yes, it'll work. Todoroki formed the lance, pure ice compressed to diamond hardness, thin as a needle. He fired it at the gap. It struck with a sharp crack. Bakugo followed instantly. AP shot, his most concentrated explosion, focused to a point. It hit the same spot and the barrier shuddered. Izuku fired. A hair-thin beam, focused to a diameter smaller than a pencil, aimed at the molecular crack the first 2 attacks had created. The barrier fractured. Not a hole, a crack. But a crack was enough. Energy leaked from the fracture like light through a damaged window. Move, Izuku said. The crack will seal in about 12 seconds. They moved. One by one, they slipped through the gap in the barrier. Izuku went last, monitoring the crack's closure rate and adjusting his beam to keep it open until everyone was through. They were inside. The interior of the barrier was worse than the exterior suggested. Buildings were damaged. Streets were cratered. The sounds of combat echoed from every direction. Explosions, ice cracking, the meaty impacts of All Might's punches connecting with things that didn't stay down. And at the center of it all, standing on the roof of a collapsed building like a king surveying his kingdom, was All for One. Izuku had never seen him before, but he knew. The way you know a storm is coming before you see the clouds. All for One wore a suit, immaculate. His face was destroyed, a mass of scar tissue with no eyes, no nose, just a mouth and smooth, ruined flesh. But his presence was immense, a gravity that pulled the battlefield toward him. He was not fighting. He was orchestrating. Every Nomu moved on his signal, every villain repositioned at his command. He conducted the battle like a symphony, and the heroes were his instruments. There you are, All for One said. He was looking directly at Izuku, without eyes, looking at him the way you look at something you've been waiting for. The boy with the interdimensional conduit. I must confess, I've been collecting quirks for over a century, and I've never encountered anything quite like you. Then this will be educational for both of us, Izuku said. All for One smiled. It was the most unsettling expression Izuku had ever seen on a human face. I don't want to kill you, child. I want your quirk, that connection to the dimension. Do you have any idea what I could do with it? The power to channel unlimited concussive force, combined with the quirks I already possess? I have a very precise idea of what you could do with it. That's why you're not getting it. All for One raised one hand. The air distorted around his fingers, a combination of force quirks, telekinetic quirks, and something else, something that felt like the fabric of reality stretching. I wasn't asking permission. He fired a blast of combined quirk energy, gravitational distortion, kinetic force, air compression, screaming across the distance between them like a missile. Scatter, Izuku commanded. The team exploded outward. Todoroki went left, ice wall, immediate, absorbing fragments of the blast. Bakugo went right, airborne, explosions carrying him up and away. Kirishima grabbed Yaoyorozu and hardened, shielding her from the shockwave. Ida grabbed Izuku and used Recipro Burst to clear the impact zone. The blast hit the street where they'd been standing. The concrete didn't crack, it evaporated. A crater appeared that went 3 meters deep. He's on a different level, Ida said, setting Izuku down. His voice was tight. Yes, he is. What's the plan? Izuku's mind was running at maximum capacity. All for One had multiple quirks, dozens, maybe hundreds. Each one was a variable. The combination space was astronomical. Fighting him directly with raw power was suicide. The man's combined output could match or exceed Izuku's, and he had the versatility advantage. But Izuku had something All for One didn't. He had a team. Todoroki, terrain control. Limit his movement options. Ice behind, fire to the sides. Create a corridor. On it. Todoroki's flames erupted on the right while a glacier formed on the left. A corridor of extremes, burning hot on one side, freezing cold on the other, with All for One at the end. Bakugo, suppression. Hit him from above. Don't try to damage him. Make him defend. I know how to fight, but Bakugo was already in the air and light, raining AP shots down on All for One's position like artillery. All for One deflected the shots with a barrier quirk, casual, dismissive. But each deflection required his attention. Each one consumed a fraction of a second. Yaoyorozu. I need 3 things. A reflective plate, 1 meter square, a concave mirror, and a glass prism. Now. Yaoyorozu didn't question it. Her quirk sparked. The items materialized. Kirishima, hold the reflective plate at a 40-degree angle, 3 meters to my right. Ida, the concave mirror, 1 meter behind me. Yaoyorozu, the prism, directly in front of me. They positioned. All for One was advancing down Todoroki's corridor, brushing aside the flames and freezing the ice with counter quirks. Bakugo's bombardment was slowing him, but not stopping him. He was immense, not in size, but in presence. Every step he took warped the ground. What are you building? All for One asked, and he sounded genuinely curious. Some kind of focusing array? Something like that, Izuku said. He fired. The beam hit the prism. The prism refracted it, splitting the single beam into 3 vectors, each one aimed at a different reflective surface. One hit Kirishima's plate and bounced toward All for One's left. One hit the concave mirror behind Izuku and reflected forward with amplified focus. One passed through clean and hit All for One directly. 3 beams, 3 angles, simultaneous. All for One's barrier quirk caught the direct beam. but the other two hit from angles the barrier wasn't covering. The plate ricochet caught him in the left shoulder. The mirror-focused beam hit his right knee. All for One staggered for the first time in the fight. One step back. One knee dipping. The students in the streets stared. Pro heroes in the distance, catching glimpses of the fight between their own battles, stared. All for One's smile changed. The curiosity was gone. Something colder replaced it. Clever boy. You built a multi-vector firing solution from household items and your classmates. I work with what I have. So do I. All for One unleashed something massive, a wave of combined quirk energy, gravitational, kinetic, thermal, electromagnetic, all at once, in all directions. A spherical blast that expanded outward like a bomb. Down! Izuku fired at the ground beneath the team. The beam cratered the street and dropped them below ground level, into the sewer system, half a second before the blast wave passed overhead. The buildings on either side of the street were leveled. Windows shattered for 3 blocks. The air itself screamed. In the sewer, Izuku and his team crouched in the dark. Debris rained from above. The ground shook. Everyone accounted for? Izuku asked. Here. Todoroki. Here, Bakugo. Quieter than usual. Here, Kirishima, Yaoyorozu, Ida, all present. He's too strong for a direct fight, Yaoyorozu said. His combined quirk output exceeds anything we can match. Agreed, Izuku said. We don't beat him with power. Then how? Izuku was thinking. The calculations were the most complex he'd ever run. Variables on variables, quirk combinations, energy types, environmental factors. The barrier dome was still active. It was self-sustaining, which meant All for One had invested energy in maintaining it. That energy was not available for combat. There, the angle. We don't beat him, Izuku said. We drain him, he explained fast. All for One was maintaining the barrier dome. The dome required continuous energy output. Every additional quirk All for One used in combat reduced the energy available for the dome. If they could force him to use enough quirks simultaneously, defensive and offensive, the dome would weaken. When it weakened enough, the pro heroes outside could break through, and All Might could engage directly. We don't need to win. We need to make him spend. How do we make someone with 100 quirks spend energy? Kirishima asked. By making him use all of them at once. Izuku outlined the plan in 45 seconds. Each person received a specific role. Each role was designed to force All for One to respond with a different quirk. They emerged from the sewer at 6 different points. Todoroki attacked from the south. Fire and ice in alternating waves, forcing All for One to use thermal resistance quirks on both ends of the spectrum. Bakugo attacked from above. Concentrated explosions at irregular intervals, forcing kinetic barrier usage. Kirishima charged directly. Unbreakable form. All for One needed a strength-type quirk to push him back. Ida ran circles around the perimeter, moving at reciprocal speed, creating sonic disturbances that required sensory quirks to track. Yaoyorozu launched a series of non-lethal but complex devices, EMPs, flash grenades, smoke canisters, sonic emitters, each one requiring a different countermeasure. And Izuku fired from everywhere, ricochets, beam splits through debris, angled shots off ice walls and metal surfaces. He turned the entire battlefield into a firing gallery, with beams coming at All for One from 12 different directions in the space of 8 seconds, each beam from a different angle. Each one requiring the villain to track and deflect individually. All for One was fighting 6 opponents using 6 different response paradigms simultaneously, while maintaining a city-scale barrier dome. For the first time, his expression showed strain. Resourceful children, he said, and there was no amusement in his voice anymore. The dome flickered. Just once, a pulse of weakness in its surface. Outside the dome, All Might saw it. Now! The number 1 hero, the symbol of peace, drew back his fist. Every ounce of remaining one-for-all power surged into that arm. He punched the dome. The barrier cracked, splintered. A web of fractures spread across its surface. Inside, All for One felt it. His attention split. The dome, the students, the incoming force. Unacceptable, he said. He raised both hands, poured power into the dome and the battlefield simultaneously. Izuku saw the opening. When All for One redirected power to the dome, his combat output dropped, just for a moment, just enough. Todoroki, Bakugo, simultaneous. Todoroki unleashed everything, fire and ice from both hands, maximum output, a storm of thermal extremes converging on All for One's position. Bakugo descended from above with his biggest explosion. Both hands, everything he had. Howitzer impact. The combined assault hit All for One from 3 directions. He blocked it, because of course he did. He was the most powerful villain in history, but blocking it cost him. The dome shuddered again. Harder this time. All Might hit it again. The dome cracked open. A section the size of a bus fell away. Pro heroes poured through the gap. Endeavor, Best Jeanist, Edge a Shot, Gang Orca, a wall of professional combat power. All for One assessed the situation in 1 second. The dome was failing. The students had exhausted his reserves more than he'd anticipated. The pro heroes were converging. Well played, he said to Izuku. There was something in his voice, not respect exactly, but recognition. The recognition of a tactician for another tactician. This isn't over, boy, not even close. What you have, what your eyes are connected to, I will have it eventually. You can't guard it forever. I don't have to guard it forever, Izuku said. I just have to guard it longer than you live. All for One's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. We'll see. A warp gate opened behind him. Kurogiri's portal, shimmering with purple-black energy. All for One stepped backward into it. The remaining villains disengaged and followed, but before the portal closed, All Might was there. Moving faster than a dying man should be able to move. His fist connected with the edge of the portal, not with All for One, but with the barrier energy that lingered around it. United States of Smash! The punch dispersed the remaining dome energy in a shockwave that blew out every window for a mile. The portal destabilized. All for One was pulled through before it collapsed. Alive, escaped, but denied his prize. The barrier dissolved. The red sky cleared. Kamino lay in ruins, but the battle was over. Izuku was on one knee. Not from injury, from exhaustion. He'd fired more beams in the last 10 minutes than he had in any single fight in his life. His optical muscles ached, his temples throbbed. The dimension behind his eyes was still pushing, still infinite, but the conduit his body had limits. Todoroki was beside him, one hand on Izuku's shoulder. Fire on one side, ice on the other, ready to protect. Bakugo was standing 3 meters away, smoking from his own explosions, uniform shredded, forearms burned. He was looking at Izuku. "You okay?" Bakugo asked. 2 words. Not shouted, not aggressive. Just asked. Izuku looked up at him. "Yeah, good. Because I'm never doing that formation thing again. My arms are killing me. Your timing was perfect. I know it was." There it was. The volume back, the Bakugo energy restored. But underneath it, something else. Something that sounded like pride aimed at someone other than himself. They stood together in the ruins of Kamino. The 3 of them. The triad that would become the most famous hero partnership in history. Though they didn't know it yet. Then, Bakugo did something he'd never done before. He extended his fist toward Izuku. Izuku looked at it, looked at Bakugo. The visor hid his eyes, but not the small, genuine smile that crossed his face. He bumped the fist. Todoroki watched, said nothing, added his own fist. 3 fists, together, in the rubble. In the distance, All Might saw it. And even in his skeletal, diminished form, his smile was blinding. The aftermath of Kamino was a turning point for Japan. Not just for the hero world, for everything. The existence of All for One became semi-public knowledge. The pro heroes who'd been involved were debriefed, treated, and in some cases hospitalized. Best Jeanist had been seriously injured. 2 other heroes were in critical condition. All Might held a press conference the following day. In his true form. Thin. Skeletal. The whole country watching, he told the truth. Not all of it, but enough. That his power was fading. That the era of a single symbol of peace was ending. That the next generation would need to carry what he could no longer hold. The nation gasped. Some people cried, some people panicked. But in the dorms at UA, Class 1A watched the broadcast in silence. And when it ended, nobody panicked. Because they'd already fought the war. They'd stood in the crater and held the line. They knew what was coming, and they were not afraid. Izuku watched the broadcast from his room, alone. And when All Might finished, when the cameras cut away and the screen went dark, Izuku turned off the television and sat in the silence. He thought about Toshinori Yagi, about the bony hand on his shoulder and the real smile and the name given in trust. He thought about Scott Summers, about the photograph in his locked drawer. about the man who led a team through wars in a world that hated them and never stopped leading. He thought about the dimension behind his eyes. Infinite. Patient. A power that had crossed from one existence to another because the universe, or something like it, had decided that the fight wasn't over. The fight was never over. Not for people like him. Not for people who carried the weight of others on their shoulders and the light of impossible power behind their eyes. That was the job. That was the burden. That was the privilege. Izuku Midoriya stood up. He walked to his desk. He unlocked the bottom drawer and took out the file. He opened it to the photograph of Scott Summers. He looked at it for a long time. "I figured some things out," he said to the photograph. "About you. About me. About why I dream in red and think in angles and lead like I've done it 1,000 times." The photograph didn't answer. It never would. Scott Summers was gone. Not dead, exactly, but transitioned. His life, his battles, his experience had become the bedrock on which a new person was built. "I'm not you," Izuku said. "I'm what comes after you. But I'll honor what you started. The way you fought. The way you led. The way you never stopped, even when the world gave you every reason to." He closed the file, locked the drawer, stood up. His visor sat on the desk, red-tinted, sleek. The ruby quartz caught the lamplight and held it like a promise. He picked it up, put it on, felt the click of the mount, the hum of the aperture, the gentle constant pressure of infinity behind his eyes, held in check by a thin layer of mineral and a will that had been forged across 2 lifetimes. "The next time they come," Izuku said to the empty room, "we'll be ready, all of us, together." The room was quiet. The campus was quiet. The world was holding its breath, waiting for the next crisis, the next battle, the next impossible moment that would demand everything from the people who chose to stand in its way. Izuku Midoriya was one of those people, the first among equals. Not because of his power, though his power could split the horizon, not because of his mind, though his mind could outmaneuver anyone alive, because of the choice, every morning, every fight, every moment of doubt and exhaustion and fear, he chose to stand. He opened the door, walked into the hallway. Uraraka was there, coming out of the common room with 2 cups of tea. She saw him and held one out. "I figured be up," she said. He took the tea. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. "Thank you, Ochako." Always. They stood in the hallway. Just 2 people, holding tea, in a school built for heroes, on the edge of a war that would define their generation. And for a moment, just a moment, the weight was lighter. Then the moment passed and the weight returned. And that was fine, because the weight was the work. And the work was the point. Izuku took a sip of tea, nodded at Uraraka, walked toward the stairwell. He climbed to the roof. His roof. The place where he did his thinking. Where the angles were widest and the sky was closest, he stood at the edge. Tokyo sprawled beneath him, glittering in the early darkness. Millions of lights. All of them unaware of the battles fought on their behalf, the sacrifices made in their name, the 15-year-old standing on a rooftop with portals to another dimension behind his eyes, and the tactical inheritance of a dead hero in his bones. The wind pulled at his hair. His visor caught the city lights and turned them red. Below, his classmates were settling into their rooms. Todoroki was meditating. Bakugo was doing push-ups. Ida was reviewing tomorrow's schedule. Yaoyorozu was reading. Kirishima was laughing at something, Kaminari said. Uraraka was standing at her window, looking up at the roof, knowing exactly who was up there. In his office, Aizawa was grading papers and pretending he didn't have a monitor showing the rooftop camera feed. The kid was fine. He was always fine. But Aizawa watched anyway, because that was his job. In a recovery ward, Toshinori Yagi was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about a conversation in a teacher's lounge and the boy who spoke like he'd been carrying worlds long before this one. Somewhere across the city, Gran Torino was eating a taiyaki and thinking about resonance memory and the strange, stubborn, magnificent kid who had inherited more than a quirk. And somewhere deeper, in a place that existed between dimensions, between lifetimes, in the red space that connected a boy in Musutafu to a man in Westchester, something ancient stirred one final time. Not a voice, not a memory, a feeling. Warm, steady, the feeling of a baton being passed, of a watch being relieved, of a mission being continued by someone who would carry it further than you ever could. Pride, Izuku felt it, behind the visor, behind his eyes, deeper than the dimension. A warmth that had nothing to do with energy or physics or interdimensional conduits. He closed his eyes. The pressure was still there. Infinite, eternal, waiting. But now it felt different. Not like a burden to be contained, like a tool to be wielded, like a legacy to be honored, like a fire to be carried forward. He opened his eyes. The visor hummed, the ruby quartz held, the city gleamed red below him. And Izuku Midoriya, field commander, tactician, weapon, hero, the inheritor of a war that spanned dimensions and lifetimes, stood on the roof of U Academy and knew, with a certainty that went deeper than thought, deeper than memory, deeper than the infinite dimension behind his eyes, exactly who he was and exactly what came next. The fight was not over. It would never be over. There would always be another battle, another villain, another impossible choice. That was the nature of the work. But the work was his, had always been his. In this life and the one before, he touched his visor, felt the weight of it, the familiar, necessary, sacred weight of the thing that stood between his power and the world. The red light pulsed once, steady, sure, not a weapon, a promise. The wind died down, the stars came out, the city breathed, and Izuku Midoriya stood watch.
The Kronos Legend roster. Huge respect to the legends fueling this journey. Your support is the engine behind everything we do. Whether you're on the front lines or reaching for the stars, you make this possible. Pro heroes. The elite front line, stepping up and setting the pace for the whole community. Rathakit, Dylan the Proud, D.I., Fire 05. Symbol of peace, the pillars of the community, the titans who keep our foundations solid and the hype alive. Yamal, Christian Mullins, Bully Maguire Shadow, Kenneth Ponteras, Neostar Productions, Asael Cardenas, Shaquan Simmons, Elijah Saunders, Peter Hamilton, Freddie Rose, Omega, Chris Talley, Alexander Thompson, Remorsefuls, Black Vein, Joshua Hedrington, Aaron Abercrombie, Drift SKER, Corey Tokars, Jan, Devin Black, Crow, Joe Bros, Ray Von Crimson River, Dante Alaster, Adam Youngers, Blood Saints, Donna Cafe, Zeph, K, Howie 60, Ignacio, Albert. Hope of the universe. The ultimate guardians, celestial tier supporters whose impact shines across the galaxy. Tayshawn Palmer, Keyshawn, Coldbane 4, The Maniac 563, Sean Brooks, Debbie Vo, L.S. Morningstar, Marl, Spintown, Ixshoot 50, Greg Green, James, Juan, and Zeno KJ. The visor cracked, the villain disintegrated, the war ended, and Izuku put his broken glasses back on and watched the sunrise like he hadn't just rewritten the laws of physics. Subscribe for more. This universe has more stories, and none of them are safe.